Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the kind of history lesson you definitely won't forget. Not because it's comforting or uplifting, no, it's because you probably won't survive this. Or if you do, you might wish you hadn't. We're talking about the Black Death. Yes, that one. 14th century Europe, where 1/3 of the population just vanishes. Imagine being part of the lucky percentage that doesn't die instantly. Now imagine waking up the next day and realising that surviving might be the actual nightmare. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm not a plague doctor, I don't make house calls, I just tell you how bad things got for people like you. And while you're at it, drop your city and local time in the comments. I want to know where and when you're watching from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts in the south of France on a sticky summer morning. The air already carries a strange sharpness, like dried blood and stale wine. You wake up in a one-room home with 3 generations of your family sharing a straw mattress and a faint hope that today won't be like yesterday. But it is. The church bells haven't stopped in days. They're tolling again, and not for celebration. You pull your rough wool tunic over your head, its scratchy fibres sticking to your unwashed skin. Outside, the neighbour's door is ajar. It's been like that for a week now. No one's come out. You don't want to know if anyone's still in there. You can't shake the feeling that death is watching. Not galloping in on a horse, but creeping under your door like smoke. It's already taken your cousin, your baker, your favourite market girl with the honey-soaked voice. Their bodies were carted away, covered in stiff sheets, feet poking out, blackened toes curled like burnt parchment. The plague doesn't kill you in dignified ways. It mocks you. It makes your body betray itself, boils the size of plums under your arms, black blotches on your thighs, blood oozing from places it has no business coming out of. You've heard rumours. It came from the east, from ships, from rats, from divine punishment. No one agrees on the source, but everyone agrees on one thing. It's everywhere now. The town square, once a vibrant mess of sheep bleats and gossiping traders, is silent except for flies. They cloud around abandoned bread stalls, landing on loaves no one dares touch. Even the beggars are gone, or too sick to beg. A horse-drawn cart creaks past. It's the death cart again. The driver doesn't shout, "Bring out your dead," like in the stories. They don't need to. The dead come out on their own, it seems, placed like broken dolls at the edge of the road by trembling hands in the night. You recognise one of the corpses, the cobbler's son. You used to play with your younger brother. Your mother says it's just a fever, and that God is testing your faith. She still clutches her rosary, knuckles white, but your father, once full of bluster and wine, has stopped speaking entirely. He just stares at the hearth, long extinguished. One historical truth here: the Black Death wasn't just one disease. Most scholars agree it was a combination of bubonic, septicemic and pneumonic plague, with different symptoms, speeds and death rates. Pneumonic was the nightmare version. It spread like a cold, killed in a day, and could empty an entire village before help ever arrived. And here's the weird part, the fringe fact that'll stick with you tonight. Some people thought the plague was caused by bad smells, so they wore little bags of herbs and dried flowers in their hoods. Or they carried oranges pierced with cloves. Spoiler alert, it did not work. It just made your corpse smell more citrusy. But what scholars still debate to this day is why the plague struck so explosively and repeatedly. Was it a perfect storm of famine, trade, climate change, and population density? Was it a biological mutation that made it jump from fleas to lungs? Or was it all those things colliding at once like a medieval apocalypse party? We'll never fully agree. You wander toward the chapel, not for mass because that's been cancelled indefinitely, but because it's where they're storing the dead now. Inside it's cool and quiet, but not peaceful. A priest paces alone, his robe streaked with ash and something darker. He won't look you in the eye. He mutters Latin between coughs. He's scared. You're all scared. Suddenly, from a side street, you hear a child cry. Not a baby. Older. Panicked. You rush toward the sound and find a girl no older than 7, barefoot, face streaked with soot and snot. She's holding a small wrapped bundle. You don't have to ask what's inside. Her brother, maybe. Maybe her doll. Maybe it's both. You don't know what to do, so you sit down beside her. The two of you just sit there, breathing the air, thick with something wrong. In the distance, thunder rolls. No storm, just the sound of another building collapsing from neglect, rot, or grief. This is how it starts for you. You haven't coughed yet. No black swellings under your armpits. You haven't buried your mother. Yet. But you will. Surviving the plague isn't about winning. It's about watching the world bleed out slowly while you somehow keep breathing, and wondering every night if that breath will be your last normal one. The rats arrive before the rumours do. Not the ordinary scruffy little ones that nibble grain in cellars, but sleek, twitchy intruders with glassy eyes and twitching tails, darting between your boots in the alleys like they own the place. You notice them at the docks first, weaving through the ropes and barrels, chasing each other beneath the carts of salted fish. They're bolder now, like they know no one's going to bother shooing them off. And maybe they're right. Everyone's too tired, too scared. You remember watching the ship come in? A creaking galley, low in the water, its sails limp, its crew almost non-existent. The dock workers hesitate before tying her off, standing back like it might explode. One man shouts something about Genoa and plague. The others laugh nervously and haul the cargo anyway. That was 2 weeks ago. Now half of them are dead, and the other half wish they were. That ship, now sealed and left to rot in the harbour, wasn't just carrying spices and wool. It carried death packed in fur, fleas in their tiny plague-carrying chariots. The fleas were the real killers, clinging to the rats hiding in barrels, and the barrels hauled directly into town. The ship never needed to dock. It could have just passed nearby and the rats would have made the swim. The plague doesn't waste time. It slips in on quiet feet. One day a merchant collapses in the square, bleeding from his nose and eyes. The next day his entire household follows, and from there it's like fire touching dry grass. Fast, hot, merciless. You try to remember a time when there weren't rats underfoot. You can't. They're everywhere now. Climbing rafters, nibbling stored oats, nesting in forgotten laundry. They've become part of the furniture. You swear you hear them breathing sometimes when you lie awake, scratching in the walls like a lullaby from hell. It's strange how no one blames the rats. Not yet. They're just pests, not prophets of doom. People point fingers in other directions. Foreign traders, heretics, angry saints. You overhear a neighbour insisting it's the stars, that Saturn has aligned with Mars in some unnatural way. Another swears it's the wells, sabotaged by enemies of Christ. A local woman claims she saw a goat walking on 2 legs near the woods. That's apparently relevant. But the rats? They just keep moving, watching, multiplying. Here's your grim historical reality check. Historians agree that black rats, rattus, and their fleas were major vectors for the bubonic strain of the plague. The fleas fed on infected rodents, then jumped to humans when the rats died off. This didn't just happen once, it was wave after wave, a chain reaction of death. It wasn't personal, it was ecological. And here's your quirky fringe fact. In some cities, cats and dogs were slaughtered because people wrongly thought they were spreading the disease. Turns out they were the best natural defense against the rats. By killing off the cats, humans made things much, much worse. Nature has a sense of irony. But even with modern research, there's a scholarly debate still simmering. Was it really just fleas on rats? Some now argue that the plague may have gone airborne in crowded cities, turning from a rodent-borne disease to a respiratory one. Others suspect human lice played a major role, so maybe it wasn't just the rats. Maybe it was you. You try not to think about that as you pick your way through the market district, which smells like vinegar and spoiled meat. You step over a pile of onions and a boot with no foot in it. A vendor left it behind in a rush or in a coffin. People wear strange things now. A boy passes you with a dead bird tied around his neck. To scare off the bad air, he says proudly. Another woman has smeared herself with human waste to confuse the disease. You try not to retch. You've taken to chewing mint leaves, just to drown out the rot stench that clings to your tongue, your clothes, your hair. At the tavern, what's left of it, you find a familiar face. Géraud, the wine seller. Once ruddy and loud, he now sips his own product in silence, his hands shaking. He doesn't greet you, just nods toward the cornerstone, where 2 men lie slumped on the floor. Dead, drunk or dying, it's impossible to say. And here's the part you try not to say aloud. You're starting to understand the plague, not in a scientific sense, but in a pattern of behaviour way. First comes the denial, then the panic, then the blame, then the acceptance. Like a grim little dance you learn by heart. People get quieter. They look at each other like walking corpses. They wash their hands until the skin cracks. Then they stop washing entirely. You remember your mother feeding bread to a rat just a month ago. She said it looked lonely. Now she wouldn't go near one if you paid her. But the rats aren't leaving. They're thriving, feeding on corpses, nesting in roof beams, multiplying in every forgotten corner. Later that night, you wake up to the sound of something chewing. You grab a stick and creep toward the pantry. A flicker of torchlight reveals 3 rats in the flour sack. One of them doesn't run when you approach. It just sits, fat and lazy, staring at you with eyes that glitter like wet coal. It knows you won't stop it. And you don't. You just watch it eat. This is the world now. A place where rats are kings, where death arrives with whiskers and a twitching nose, and where survival depends less on strength and more on staying 2 steps ahead of something you can't see but definitely can hear. It starts as a cough. Nothing dramatic, just a dry, hacking cough from the butcher's apprentice, who's usually half asleep and fully drunk. You barely notice it the first time, echoing through the alley as you haul water from the town pump. The second time it's closer. The third time he's not coughing anymore. He's curled in the gutter, twitching and mumbling about his mother. The speed is what unnerves you. It's not like regular sickness, not like the fevers you've known that come on slow and cruel. This is sudden, violent. One day someone's joking about drinking too much wine, the next their neck is the colour of eggplant and their eyes are rolling back. It's as if the air itself has turned a traitor. You try holding your breath around sick people. You even try walking with a cloth over your mouth soaked in wine vinegar, because someone said it helped. You smell like a salad and feel like a fool, but at this point you'll try anything. Soon the coughing isn't just the butcher's apprentice, it's the cobbler, the midwife, your own cousin, who you shared a blanket with just 2 nights ago. You keep replaying the moment. Did she sneeze? Did you touch your face afterward? You wash your hands in salt water until they sting. It won't matter. You know it won't. The idea of safe distance doesn't exist yet. People haven't quite figured out that being in the same room might be a death sentence. You're still visiting neighbours, still going to the breadline. You still try to care for your sick uncle, until his lips turn black and you realise, mid-prayer, that he's already gone. There's no time to grieve, no time for anything, really. You don't even look at the bodies anymore unless they're blocking the doorway. You step over them, muttering apologies to the dead under your breath. You used to look them in the eye. Now you only look at the feet. Here's the brutal historical fact. Once the pneumonic form of the plague took hold, it could spread through coughs and sneezes. No rats or fleas needed, just air. Some victims died within 24 hours. There were no early warning signs. You'd feel slightly off in the morning, and by evening your family was digging a shallow grave in frozen ground, if they had the strength. And the strange little wrinkle? Some people survived, but became plague carriers, unknowingly spreading it for weeks while appearing totally fine. They were like walking curses. No boils, no fever, just deadly hugs. You might be one of them. Still debated today what made it spread so fast. Was it trade routes? Urban overcrowding? A unique strain of the bacteria with higher virulence? Or was the world just unlucky, stacked like dry timber waiting for the first spark? Some scholars say Europe was primed by decades of famine and war. Others think it was all about port cities and climate shifts. Everyone agrees it's spread like nothing seen before, or since. You start noticing who avoids who. People you used to see sharing stews and songs are now backing away from each other like skittish cats. A handshake is now a threat. You find yourself dodging eye contact, shoulders brushing walls to avoid anyone walking toward you. But isolation's not natural, not for long. One day you wake up, roll over and feel a heaviness in your chest. Not from illness, but from the silence. The kind of silence that buzzes. You realise you haven't spoken out loud in days, so you talk to a tree, a bucket, yourself. Meanwhile the town starts falling apart in little pieces. One day the blacksmith doesn't open his forge. The next day the baker's door is bolted shut. Eventually, you're walking through a ghost village with no destination, just tracing familiar routes as if routine could protect you. That's when you find the catacomb under the church. You didn't know it existed, just stumbled on it after noticing disturbed earth near the chapel steps. It's cool down there, almost peaceful. Bones are stacked along the walls like firewood, some ancient, some frighteningly fresh. A candle flickers near the centre, and beside it lies a child maybe 10 years old draped in a moth-eaten sheet, hands folded neatly. Someone brought her here. Someone who cared. You sit beside her for a long time. You don't cry. You're far beyond crying now. Instead, you whisper her name, though you don't know it. It feels right. Later that night, the coughing comes from your own doorway. Not inside, just right there like a dare. You freeze in bed, not breathing, not moving. The cough comes again, then silence. You stay like that for hours, eyes open, heart pounding, until the sun rises and birds begin to chirp again like nothing ever happened. Like the world isn't rotting around you. You think about leaving, heading to the hills, the forest, anywhere but here. But where would you go? Every town is the same now, closed gates, suspicious eyes, plague behind every door, even travellers get chased away, so you stay. You stay and keep breathing, keep walking, keep dodging the next cough, like it's a dagger thrown in your direction. You become smaller, quieter, like a shadow of yourself. Because when death moves this fast, your only defence is becoming hard to notice. You've started checking your body every morning. You lift your arms slowly, almost ritualistically, fingers trembling as they explore the tender hollows beneath. You scan your thighs, your neck, your groin. Anywhere a swelling might appear. It's not paranoia, it's preparation. One boil is all it takes. The infamous bubo, hard, dark and hot to the touch. Once it shows, you're on the clock. You've seen it happen enough times to know the countdown. Maybe 3 days, sometimes less. You stop measuring time in hours or even days, you measure it in symptoms. The first time you saw one, it was on the village miller. He stumbled out of his home shirtless, skin mottled like a bruised peach, clutching a lump the size of a chicken egg under his arm. He screamed something about demons. He begged the sky. Then he dropped in the dirt and started convulsing, foam bubbling out between his teeth. Nobody went near him, not even his own wife. "You stayed away too? You're not a hero." The smell came next, not from him, but from them, the bodies. The plague doesn't kill cleanly. It bloats, it oozes, it rots before you're even dead. The infected begin to stink while they're still breathing. A sour, yeasty odour, like wet dough left to spoil in the sun. You catch it on the wind sometimes. You'll be walking past a door, and there it is, that cloying scent that makes your stomach twist. Church bells have gone mostly silent now, not because people stopped dying, because there's no one left to ring them. Instead, you hear handbells, small ones clutched by the bell ringers, the outcasts whose job is now to walk the streets warning others away from the sick. "Bring out your dead" used to be a joke. Now it's a chant, a dirge, a desperate plea. They're always followed by the death carts. Wooden wagons with squealing wheels and broken axles, pulled by gaunt horses that look barely alive. The cartmen wear scarves over their mouths and carry long hooks to drag out bodies that won't budge. Some wear crude leather gloves. Others just coat their hands in pitch and hope for the best. It's not that they're brave, they're desperate. The church pays well, in bread mostly, and if you don't already have a job, the plague makes one for you. That's how you end up helping one afternoon. It wasn't planned. You just found yourself outside as the cart rolled by and someone shouted, "Hey you, grab the legs." You don't argue anymore. You just obey. You've lost count of how many bodies you've lifted, how many you've turned away from so you wouldn't see the eyes still open, or the mouths frozen mid-scream. One historical fact: the infamous plague boils, those swollen lymph nodes, weren't just grotesque. They were terrifyingly painful. Contemporary accounts describe people howling for hours, clawing at themselves, begging to be cut open. Some doctors actually lanced the buboes with knives, hoping to release the poison. It worked about as well as throwing leeches on a forest fire. And here's your bizarre little detail. To fight the smell of all that death, people burned bundles of rosemary and juniper indoors, turning their homes into smoky hothouses of barely concealed panic. Others just carried sweet-smelling apples in handkerchiefs, pressing them to their faces whenever they passed by someone breathing too heavily. If you were rich enough, you might have a pomander, a little perforated orb filled with cloves and ambergris. You wouldn't be safe, but you'd die smelling like wealth. Still debated today. What exactly did the bubonic infection feel like in those final hours? Some sources say it was like being burned alive from the inside. Others describe hallucinations, paranoia, and uncontrollable rage. Could the bacteria have invaded the brain in later stages? Or were people just breaking under the mental weight of watching their entire world collapse? No one agrees. We only know that no one died peacefully. You find yourself muttering prayers you barely remember learning. Pieces of Latin, nonsense rhymes. You chant them under your breath as you tie corpses together with rope. 2 by 2 to make the lifting easier. You try not to look at their faces. Faces make it personal. You look at hands instead. Hands with rings still on them, dirt under the nails. Once, you see a painted fingernail, sky blue, chipped at the edge. Someone had tried to feel pretty once. At night, the dreams come. You see black boils under your skin. You wake up clawing at your armpits. You smell rot even when nothing is there. You ask someone to sniff you, and they back away. You laugh it off, but you don't sleep after that. One day, while helping load a particularly heavy body onto the cart, the man next to you collapses. Not from the plague, just from exhaustion. He hits the cobblestones hard. You rush to him, hand outstretched. Then you hesitate. What if it's not exhaustion? What if that fall was the beginning of the end? You back away slowly, muttering an apology he doesn't hear. He's still breathing. For now. You walk home through alleys stained red with fluids you no longer bother identifying. You pass shuttered windows with red X's painted on them, marking the sick. Or maybe just marking who's already dead inside. You avoid stepping in puddles. Not because you're worried about getting wet. Because you know what makes puddles now. The sky is grey again. It's always grey. You can't remember the last time you saw real sunlight. Maybe it's the smoke from all the funeral pyres. Maybe the sun just doesn't want to see what's happening down here anymore. As you climb into your bed, if you can call a burlap sack over straw a bed, you find yourself wishing for something you wouldn't have dared to whisper a month ago. You wish, just a little, that it would hurry up and get you already, because the waiting is so much worse. There's a sick kind of irony to surviving. At first, you're grateful. You wake up each day and do a quiet inventory. No swellings, no fever, no coughing fits that end with blood on your pillow, and you breathe a little easier. You've made it through another night. You're still here. But after a while, that relief sours. It curdles into something worse. Because what the stories never told you is that surviving the plague doesn't mean you win. It means you're left behind. And what's left behind isn't a world you recognise. It's a place haunted by absences. People-shaped holes in your life where loved ones used to be. Entire streets that used to buzz with life, now filled only with wind and whispers. You're one of the lucky ones, if you call waking up screaming in an empty house lucky. Your hands tremble when they're still. You find yourself talking to people who aren't there, muttering to your mother while you eat stale bread, telling your sister not to forget her shawl before stepping outside, even though her ashes are buried under a sycamore tree. If anyone hears you, they don't say anything. They're probably doing the same. One day you catch your reflection in the water barrel. You don't recognise the face staring back. Your skin is sallow, your cheeks sunken. You've got lines across your forehead you don't remember earning. Your eyes dart like prey. You look like someone who's been at war for years. And you have. Only your battlefield was your bedroom, and the enemy had no face. Do you remember that and how people used to touch? A hand on your shoulder, a pat on the back. Now everyone recoils at closeness, as if affection itself is contagious. You haven't been hugged in months. You try wrapping your own arms around your chest. Just to remember the shape of warmth. It doesn't help. Here's the historical kicker. Plague survivors were often ostracised, even after recovery. People feared they still carried disease. They were called tainted, even if they showed no symptoms. Survivors lost friends, jobs, homes. In some towns, they were banned from returning. Death wasn't the only exile. Life came with one too. And here's a bizarre little footnote. In some places, survivors had to prove they were clean by submitting to tests. One method, shaving all your body hair and pouring vinegar over your skin. If you didn't flinch from the sting, congratulations, you were declared pure. That's not science, that's just medieval hazing. Modern scholars argue about how many people truly survived the first wave. Some estimates say up to 50% died in Europe. Others argue that in some towns, mortality was as high as 70% or more, meaning that every survivor was walking through a landscape that had been fundamentally erased. No economy, no leadership, no family structure, just dust and echoes. You try to do normal things, you sweep your floor, though there's barely anything left to track in. You light a candle at dusk and sit by the hearth. You hum. The song has no tune, it's just a sound to break the silence. Then come the guilt flashes. You remember your cousin who tried to help that sick old woman. She didn't make it. You did. Your cousin was kinder, smarter, funnier. But she's gone and you're still sucking air. You feel it in your chest like a stone you can't dislodge. Survivor's guilt wasn't a term back then, but it has a taste, a weight, and a smell. And oh, the smells that linger. Your house, once filled with the scent of stew and hay and beeswax candles, now smells like boiled rags and mould. You've tried burning lavender and sage, but it just makes it smell like mould and lavender. You've taken to hanging herbs over your doorway, like a charm. You know it's useless, but it's something. The worst part, the silence where voices used to be, the gossip, the bickering, the laughter that used to leak from every doorway in the neighbourhood. Now it's just the soft creak of empty chairs and the occasional crash of a pot falling because a stray dog knocked over a table. You speak aloud sometimes just to fill the void. Sometimes you even argue with no one, just to remember what noise feels like. You try to join with others who've survived, but the groups are brittle and strange. Everyone is either numb or frantically pretending life has gone back to normal. You meet in the square, a loose gathering of hollow-eyed souls sharing bitter beer and stories that trail off mid-sentence. No one laughs anymore, except once in a while when someone makes a joke too dark to be real. You laugh because the alternative is screaming. Someone mentions the plague wedding they saw, 2 teenagers forced into marriage by desperate parents while both of them had visible boils. To preserve the family line, now they say, they didn't make it past the ceremony. No one reacts. Another survivor talks about watching a man eat his own dog because he was starving. Another talks about forgetting their mother's face, not because she's dead, but because there's been too much death between then and now. You want to contribute something, but your stories all end the same way, and then they died. So instead, you just sip the beer and stare at the cobblestone, and try not to notice how every stain looks like dried blood. You keep thinking things will feel better tomorrow, that you'll wake up and the birds will be louder and the streets less hollow. But the healing isn't coming in days or weeks, it might not come at all. No one prepared you for what living through something like this does to a person. You survive the plague, but you come out different. Not stronger, not wiser, just changed. Like a tool that's been bent. Still functional, but no longer quite the shape it was meant to be. It's the quiet that gets to you. Not the silence of peace, but the hollow absence of life. Days stretch on without rhythm. The market square, once filled with the clamour of goats, traders, children, gossip and arguments about the price of onions, now echoes with nothing but the wind whistling between boarded-up stalls. You walk the streets alone, not because you enjoy the solitude, but because there's no one left to walk with. It feels like the world has been drained of sound, colour and movement. Even the birds are quieter now, as if nature itself is mourning. You don't even know how long it's been. Weeks, months, it all blurs together. There's no church bell to mark the hour, no town crier to announce anything other than death. Time has become this shapeless, dragging thing that pulls behind you like a sack of wet bones. It's around now that the graves begin to fail. At first, people tried to be respectful. There were prayers, small ceremonies, hasty but heartfelt, a candle here, a song there, but as the deaths multiplied, the ceremonies stopped. The graves became shallow, dug in haste by exhausted hands. The grave diggers dropped bodies in by the dozen. There weren't enough coffins to go around, so they used none at all. Fabric when available, otherwise just skin against soil. Now, the ground is giving up its dead. Heavy rains have exposed swollen arms and twisted feet, a hand reaching out of the dirt like it's waving goodbye. You pass a graveyard on the edge of town and feel your stomach twist. A dog gnaws at something that from a distance you pray is just a stick. You pray harder when you get closer. Mass graves become the only option, trenches dug so deep you can barely see the bottom. You're ordered to help one day, again no choice in the matter, and handed a shovel. You stand there staring into that long dark ditch, and you realise it looks more like a wound than a grave. You and 5 others begin loading the bodies. Some are stiff, others still warm. You try not to look at faces. Again, you fail. There's a moment, just a flicker, when you recognise someone. A girl from school. You'd kissed her once behind the baker's oven. Her lips were dry and quick, like she was scared. Her hair is matted now. Her mouth hangs open. You drop her in without a word. You don't cry, you don't say her name, you can't afford to. Here's your historical hard truth. Many European cities ran out of space for the dead, and had to resort to piling them into common pits, sometimes with lime poured over the corpses in a vain attempt to control the smell and disease. Lime helped, but only a little, and only until it rained. Your strange but true fact of the night. In some areas, bells stopped ringing, not out of reverence, but because all the bell ringers died. Whole towns had to assign temporary mourners just to toll the bells once for each death. Eventually they stopped bothering. Death became too common to mourn. And the academic puzzle that still stumps historians: why were some cities devastated while others, sometimes just a few miles away, were barely touched? Was it luck, quarantine, climate, immunity in small isolated populations? No one can agree, no one probably ever will. It's like the plague played favourites and no one knows why. As you help shovel dirt over the ditch, a woman nearby collapses mid-sentence. Not from plague, just from sheer exhaustion. You help her up, your hands slick with sweat and filth, and she grips you like you're the only thing keeping her tethered to the earth. Maybe you are. Maybe she is for you. It's hard to tell anymore. That night, you don't sleep. You lie on your back and listen to the wind knock against the shutter. Your home used to feel safe, warm. Now it's just shelter, a box to hide in, waiting for the storm to finish what it started. You find yourself whispering again words without meaning. Prayers, names, numbers, anything to keep your thoughts from dragging you under. In the morning you find a note pinned to your door. Scrawled in shaky ink it reads, "They're burning the houses in the West Quarter. Too many dead inside." You head that way out of instinct. The smoke greets you first, thick and choking, rising like a black snake against the sky. The scent is unmistakable, burning wood, yes, but also cloth, flesh, hair. You watch from a distance as men with torches and damp cloths tied around their faces set fire to buildings. No attempt is made to pull anyone out. If they're inside, it's assumed they're beyond help. It's mercy, they say. You don't go any closer. You can't. The fires continue for days. When they finally stop, a strange calm follows, like the town has exhaled, scorched and emptied. It's safer now, in the same way a battlefield is safe once everyone is dead. You walk the streets and count how many doors are missing. How many homes have black scorch marks licking up the walls. You keep your own house clean, not out of pride, but because it's something to do, something to control. One day you wake and realise you haven't seen another person in 3 days, not a soul. You walk through the town and no one is outside, not even a bell ringer. You begin to wonder, am I the only one left? Is this what winning looks like? Then you hear it. A soft cry from somewhere near the church. You follow the sound and find a boy, no more than 5, sitting beside a corpse. His mother, maybe. His clothes are torn, his face is blank. He doesn't look at you when you speak. You kneel beside him and put your arm around his shoulders. He doesn't resist. You sit with him until the sun sets. Neither of you say anything. You're not sure either of you know how to anymore. The first time you see a plague doctor up close, you're not sure if you're looking at a person or some kind of ghost. He steps out of the mist near the edge of the riverbank, the long black cloak rippling in the breeze like it's got a life of its own. His face, if you can call it that, is a smooth white beak, curved and gleaming, with dark glass circles for eyes. He looks like a bird that wandered out of a nightmare, the kind that watches, waits, and never blinks. You've heard rumours about them for weeks now, whispers carried between grieving mothers and shaky priests. The doctors from the cities wear bird masks and carry canes. They poke at you from a distance. They smell like vinegar and cloves. They wear long robes coated in wax or tar to keep the sickness out. They are apparently your best hope for survival. When the man in black finally speaks, his voice is muffled and thin. You can't see his mouth. You can't see anything human about him at all. He asks if anyone here is ill. You answer without thinking. Everyone's already dead. He doesn't react. Just writes something down in a small bound book with gloved hands. Then he walks away. You trail him for a while, partly out of curiosity, partly out of dread. You watch as he visits houses marked with red paint or cloth. Some of them he enters, others he just stands in front of for a long moment, muttering something beneath his mask, then turns away. He's not saving anyone. He's taking inventory. Historically, plague doctors weren't real doctors, at least not by today's standards. Many were hired by towns simply to count the bodies, record symptoms, and make sure the sick didn't escape quarantine zones. Their iconic bird masks? They weren't for show. The long beak was packed with herbs, flowers and spices, lavender, mint, even crushed rose petals, meant to purify the air. Because at the time, people believed in the theory of miasma, that disease spread through bad air. And the fringe detail. Some of those beaks weren't just full of flowers. In a few regions, they included camphor, vinegar-soaked sponges, or even mercury based on local superstition. Essentially, the masks became medieval air fresheners, and none of it, of course, actually worked. They weren't barriers to plague, they were scented helmets of false hope. What historians still debate today is whether plague doctors helped or harmed communities. Some accounts describe them as cold and efficient, others as outright terrifying. Some people refused to open their doors to them at all, believing they were harbingers of death more than healers. And honestly, looking at one in person, you get it. If someone showed up at your door wearing a bird's face and carrying a stick, your first thought wouldn't be, "Ah, excellent, my saviour has arrived." You sit outside the chapel and watch the plague doctor circle the graveyard. He never removes his mask, never lifts his hood. Occasionally he scratches a mark into a doorframe or drops something small and wrapped into a fire. You ask him what it is. He doesn't answer. He carries a long wooden cane, which he uses not for walking, but for prodding the sick, lifting bedsheets, pointing at boils, keeping distance. You watch him tap at a young man's ribs, mutter, "Too far gone," and move on. The man is still alive, eyes wide, mouthing, "Please." It doesn't matter. He's already invisible. You try to approach the doctor again later, but he raises his cane and waves you back. Whether it's because he thinks you're infected, or simply doesn't want to be bothered, you don't know. You're not sure he even sees you as human anymore. Maybe you aren't. Maybe none of you are. You've become specimens, numbers, notches in his ledger. That night you dream about the mask. You see yourself wearing it, standing in the sea of corpses, faceless, voiceless, watching the people beg you for help. You say nothing, you just keep walking. The next morning the doctor is gone. No one saw him leave. You ask around, but people shrug. One old woman says she thinks he was a ghost. Or a devil. Same thing now. You want to argue, but you don't. Because part of you believes it too. With the doctor gone, a strange sense of abandonment settles in. You didn't trust him, but he was something. A sign that someone, somewhere still cared enough to send help. Now even that illusion has vanished. You're on your own again. Just you and the silence. You decide to go through the belongings he left behind, hidden in a box near the chapel marked with a crude symbol. Inside you find small packets of herbs, a half-used bottle of vinegar, scraps of notes in incomprehensible shorthand, and a spare mask. You hold it in your hands and realise how light it is. You try it on just for a moment. The smell is overwhelming, earthy, sour, almost sweet. It's like pressing your face into a rotting garden. You take it off quickly, but the scent clings to your skin for hours. That night a new group of people arrive from the countryside. Wanderers, survivors, desperate and dirty. They look around your half-ruined town with hollow eyes. One of them approaches you and asks, "Is it safe here?" You don't know how to answer. You want to say yes, you want to believe it. But you just gesture at the graveyard, at the scorched houses, at the horizon stained with smoke. The man nods. "Better than where we came from," he says. And somehow that feels like the most honest thing anyone's said in weeks. You're sitting outside the chapel, chewing a twig because it helps your nerves when you hear screaming. Not the frantic, high-pitched kind that comes from someone seeing their first corpse. Those have mostly faded. This is a different tone, furious, desperate, raw. You follow the sound to the town square where a group has formed, tightly packed like frightened animals. In the centre, a young woman writhes on the cobblestones, her hair matted with sweat, her arms pinned by two men as another sharpens a knife on a whetstone. You push through the crowd just in time to see them bleed her. The blood pools thick and fast, spilling from a gash just above her elbow. She's sobbing, but also laughing in a strange, broken way. You hear someone mutter, "The fever's gotten to her mind." Another whispers, "It's the bad blood has to come out." No one questions the logic. Not really, because in a world where nothing makes sense anymore, superstition fills the vacuum. People have started turning to old remedies, to crude rituals, to anything that can offer the illusion of control. And so bloodletting is back. They say sickness lives in the blood, that if you cut deep enough fast enough, you can drain the poison before it settles in. You've heard stories of entire families taking turns with the same blade, leaving trails of red down their arms like some kind of offering. They call it cleansing, you call it what it is, desperation with a knife. Later that day you hear about a priest in the next village over who's taken to dunking the sick in freezing rivers, trying to wash the sin off their bodies. Someone else swears burying a dead frog in the garden will keep your house safe. You try not to laugh. You also bury a frog, just in case. There's a new kind of person appearing around town now. The self-proclaimed healers. They dress like pilgrims and carry strange bags of dried herbs, talking about humours and bile and energies. One of them insists you let him wave a burning feather over your head. You say no, he does it anyway. You sneeze and he nods with approval. See? It's working. And then there are the ones who skip the rituals entirely and go straight for the scapegoats. You hear that in another town. A group of villagers burned a woman alive because she looked at a cow wrong. You think it's absurd until someone starts looking at your neighbour the same way. He's old, hunched, and talks to himself. That's all it takes. One night he's dragged from his home. You don't see him again. The next morning there's a pile of soot where his hut used to be. Here's your cold historical fact. People in the 14th century turned to whatever they had left when medicine failed, which was mostly ritual, religion, and torture. Bloodletting, boiling herbs, enemas of vinegar, and yes, frog-based remedies were actually written down as treatments. Many believed that the plague was punishment from God. Some believed it was the devil himself. Others blamed the alignment of planets, or the poison in the air. Very few blamed the fleas. And here's your grim little oddity. Leeches made a massive comeback during the plague. They weren't cheap, so towns would assign community leech keepers to grow and harvest them. It didn't work. But again, desperate people, desperate choices. At some point, someone even tried eagle dung mixed with rose oil. You can guess how effective that was. Modern scholars still argue about how much of this superstition was purely ignorance, and how much was fueled by grief and mass trauma. Some argue that people needed these rituals, not to cure, but to cope, that every boiled root and muttered charm was a way to assert, "I'm not helpless." Others think these were just opportunistic quacks taking advantage of a scared population. It's hard to say, probably both. As the days roll on, you see more public spectacles. A woman made to kneel in the mud while a priest smashes jars of cursed salt over her head. Children marked with chalk symbols. A man with a broken foot healed by having it hit with a wooden cross. People are inventing hope on the spot, slapping faith onto their pain like a bandage that can't stick. And if the self-proclaimed healers don't calm people down, the fanatics do the opposite. A new group marches through the village wearing white robes, chanting in Latin, and beating themselves with whips. Their backs are raw, their robes stained red. The flagellants, someone whispers. They are trying to atone for all of us. Atone for what, you wonder? For being born at the wrong time? For breathing bad air? For not dying fast enough? The flagellants scream about sin and fire and punishment. They're loud, terrifying, and more contagious than the plague itself. Not the disease, but the fear. You watch as ordinary villagers begin to mimic them, grabbing sticks, lashing themselves, crying for forgiveness they don't understand. Some parents even make their children join in. Better to bleed now than burn later, one woman tells her son, who can't be older than 7. You back away from the square slowly. These aren't your people anymore. They're caught in something deeper than sickness, a spiral, a madness. That night you light your candle early and stay indoors. You hear the chants echo through the streets long after midnight. Forgive us, O Lord, for we have sinned. The next morning the tavern is empty and 2 houses are on fire. You've seen people die. You've seen them rot. But this is something different. It's like watching the soul of the village unravel, thread by thread. And you wonder, not for the first time, if maybe the sickness was only the beginning. You stop expecting fairness. That idea left a long time ago, probably around the same time you watched a wealthy merchant's corpse get loaded into the cart with a silk handkerchief still clutched in one fist. Even dead, he looked expensive. His family, 3 carriages strong, had fled the town a week before the plague reached your end of the street, stuffing their wagons with silver, spices, wine and prayer beads. But you watched his window long after they'd left because he stayed behind. To guard the house, maybe. To die with it, more likely. Now, his silk shirt is stiff with dried blood. You know this because you were one of the people who carried him out. You learned quickly that wealth doesn't make you immune, but it does buy you distance. The rich left early. Not all of them made it, of course, but they got a head start. They ran to their countryside estates, locked their gates, and set fire to bridges after they crossed them. They brought with them priests, physicians, and their best linens. You brought whatever bread you could carry and a skin of water. The poor? We stayed, we always do. Someone has to dig the graves, light the fires, carry the bodies. Someone has to survive it, if only to remember how bad it got. There's an unwritten rule now. If your clothes are clean and your hands aren't cracked from labour, don't walk the streets alone. People are watching, not out of envy, but desperation. You've heard of looters, gangs forming in the back alleys. A man got stabbed last week over a wheel of stale cheese and a dried fig. That's what hunger does. That's what hopelessness does. And now there are whispers of plague houses being ransacked, not just for food or gold, but for valuables left behind by the dying. Rings, crosses, even shoes. The thieves are careful. They wear cloth masks soaked in wine and tie rags around their hands. They move fast. Get in, get out, pray you're not dragging the sickness home with you. You haven't stooped to that. Yet. One day, a well-dressed stranger shows up in town. His cloak is lined with fur, his boots polished, his beard trimmed to perfection. He claims to be from Florence, says he's seeking land, maybe a house to buy. You and the others look at him like he's insane. Who buys land here now? This isn't property. It's a graveyard. But that's just it. He isn't insane, he's opportunistic. Because in the ruins of everything, the wealthy see investment. They buy up whole neighbourhoods for pennies, estates with boarded windows still reeking of death. They don't even clean them out. They just mark them down in ledgers and move on. He offers to buy your neighbour's home, the one with the vine-choked garden and 3 rotting shutters, for 2 loaves of rye and a jug of honey wine. The woman hesitates for all of 5 seconds, then signs a makeshift deed with a blood-smeared thumbprint. Here's your bitter historical fact. After the Black Death, many aristocrats increased their land holdings massively, buying up vacant plots left behind by the dead. Whole swathes of property changed hands. Nobles grew richer while peasants were expected to go back to work, except there was no one left to do the work. And your strange but true footnote? Some cities issued sumptuary laws, rules dictating what survivors could and couldn't wear, because so many poor people suddenly had access to the fancy clothes of the dead. Picture this. A former stable boy strutting through town in a brocade vest meant for a baron. It caused panic, not because it was disrespectful, but because it blurred the lines between the classes. What historians still scratch their heads over is how quickly the social order began to shift. In theory, the old hierarchies should have held. But in practice, labour became scarce, and that meant power changed hands in strange ways. Poor survivors found themselves suddenly needed. You see it begin in your own town. A woman who used to scrub floors is now organising food distribution. A boy who never spoke a word louder than a whisper is now keeping order with a stick and a voice that cracks from overuse. No one's asking who their fathers were anymore. They're asking who can build, who can heal, who can lead. But it doesn't mean life is easier, it's just different. The rich who stayed are fewer, but louder. They hire guards, throw up fences around their estates, hoard their wine, and still find ways to look down at you through their shuttered windows. You catch them muttering about the lower sort and how disorder is more dangerous than the plague itself, as if you caused this, as if dying in smaller numbers was unfair to them. One afternoon you walk past the manor at the edge of town. Used to be the Lord's summer home. Now it's occupied by a merchant from Genoa who bought it outright in the chaos. He's having a feast. You hear the music, soft lute and flute, sweet and infuriating. You smell roasted pork. You see silhouettes of dancing in the candlelight. You haven't eaten meat in a month. Someone beside you mutters, "They should have choked on the boat that brought the plague." No one disagrees. You know it's dangerous to think like this, to resent those who escaped just because they had coin. But you can't help it. Suffering has a way of making morality feel optional. You wonder what kind of world will emerge after this, if the poor will rise, if the old order will crumble, or if it'll all be scrubbed away, whitewashed, the way history always gets rewritten by the survivors with the most gold. But for now, you just keep walking, past the fires, past the gates, past the manor that smells like roasted fruit and laughter. And you think quietly, bitterly, maybe next time the plague should start there. You wake up to silence, not the empty kind and not the peaceful kind, but that horrible loaded silence, the kind that presses against your ribs and makes your skin feel too tight. You know something's wrong before your eyes even open. You reach across the straw mattress. It's still warm, but no one's there. You sit up slowly. The house is dim. Your little brother, Hugo, should be snoring in the corner. Your grandmother should be muttering in her sleep, flailing her arms like she's chasing dreams. But there's nothing, just the creak of old beams and the distant echo of crows. You find your brother first, slumped by the hearth. His face is too pale. You say his name softly, then louder. You shake his shoulder. It moves too easily. Your breath catches. No swelling, no blood, just stillness. Then you find the note, a scrap of parchment on the table written in your grandmother's slanted hand. He was coughing. I took him to the chapel. Pray for me. You don't cry, you don't scream. You just sit down in the middle of the room and stare at your hands. They look too young to belong to someone this hollow. You whisper to the floor, I told you to keep him warm. The floor doesn't answer. There's nothing more to do. No one to call. You throw a few things into a sack, a crust of bread, a rag, your father's knife, and head toward the chapel. Maybe they're still there. Maybe you're not too late. You tell yourself that all the way down the empty road. When you arrive, you know, you can feel it. The door is ajar, the smell hits first. You steel yourself and step inside. They're there. Both of them, curled in one of the back pews. Your grandmother's arm wrapped around your brother, like she was shielding him from the cold, or from death. You walk to them, sit beside them, you don't touch them. Not yet. You just sit there, letting the sunlight filter through the cracked stained glass, casting weird patterns on their faces. You talk to them for a while. Then you get to work. You dig the graves yourself, behind the chapel near the elder tree. The soil is hard and dry and your hands blister. You don't stop. Not until the sun dips low and the shadows stretch across the grass like spilled ink. You don't have a prayer prepared, so you just say their names over and over until the dirt covers them. Then you sit on the mound and wonder what comes next. This is how it goes for children now. They become their own parents, their own priests, their own gravediggers. No one is spared the work of surviving, especially not the young. The historical truth here? After the plague tore through Europe, entire communities of children were left orphaned. Some were taken in by relatives, others wandered, forming little bands of survivors who moved from village to village, stealing food and sleeping in barns. Church records from the time mention feral children who didn't speak properly and were afraid of adults. They weren't raised, they just happened to live long enough. And here's a strangely specific but very real phenomenon. Plague orphans were sometimes branded, marked on the hand or the face to show they'd survived illness or come from a contaminated house. The mark was supposed to help protect others, but it also followed them for life. It turned childhood into a warning label. Scholars still debate the psychological impact of that generation. We don't have their diaries. We just have the records of how many of them ended up in asylums, brothels, or monasteries. Some argue they grew up tougher. Others say they never really grew up at all, just aged, numb and detached. You know some of the other orphans. There's Marcel, who only eats in corners and won't speak above a whisper. There's Elise, who laughs at funerals. There's Jack, who tries to act like a soldier boy, but flinches every time someone coughs. Sometimes you gather together in the square. Not for comfort, but because it's better than being alone. You don't talk much. Just share bits of bread, stories with no endings, and songs with made-up words. Someone carves a game board into a cobblestone with a nail. You play with pebbles. You win once. It doesn't feel like winning. One afternoon you see a group of older boys dragging a smaller one toward the river. You run to stop them, shouting, "What are you doing?" They laugh. "He's cursed," one says. He whispers to the dead. They shove the boy to the muddy water and walk away. You help him out. He doesn't thank you, just stares with wide dark eyes and says, "You'll talk to them too soon enough." You believe him. That night you dream of your brother's hand poking through the dirt. Not in horror, just reaching, asking for yours. You wake up gasping. You try to draw his face in the dust the next morning, but it fades too quickly. You panic, worried you're already forgetting him. So you speak his name out loud. Do it again the next day, and the next. Like an anchor you're not ready to pull up. Sometimes you hear him in the wind. You know it's not real, but you answer anyway. Because being the one who survives means carrying all the voices no one else is left to remember. And that weight doesn't get lighter. Not ever. You spend more time talking to the dead than to the living. Not in a creepy seance way, just in the casual, desperate way that starts to feel normal. You murmur to your grandmother while tying bundles of sticks. You tell your brother about strange clouds you saw in the sky. You confess things to your mother's ghost you never said when she was alive. You don't think it's madness. You think it's what's left. because what else is there? The living avoid each other now. Eye contact feels risky. Conversations die out after a sentence or two, like breath in cold air. No one asks how you're doing. Everyone knows the answer. You're doing like everyone else. Badly, barely, and probably worse tomorrow. And then there are the new survivors, the ones crawling out from behind sealed doors or returning from the hills where they fled early on. They're changed too, not just thinner or dirtier. They're different, hollow behind the eyes. They speak in half thoughts, some don't speak at all. You met a man last week who only blinked when you asked his name. Just blinked. Once, then walked away. You wonder what happened to him. You wonder what's happening to you. You still haven't cried, not really. Your throat burns sometimes, but the tears don't come. You think if you start, you won't stop. So instead, you busy your hands. Fix things, sweep ashes out of the chapel, untangle broken fishing nets, stir potions that probably don't work but at least smell like something other than death. You fix a cracked bowl and feel victorious for an hour. But the guilt, that's always there. Guilt like a second skin, you feel it when you eat, even if it's just stale rye. You feel it when you laugh, which happens by accident once, when you trip over a goat. The laugh feels unnatural. It echoes. You clamp your hand over your mouth like you've said something blasphemous. It's because they're gone, and you're not. You start seeing things out of the corner of your eye. Not spirits, just shadows of memory. A flicker of someone brushing their hair near a doorway that hasn't opened in weeks. A shape that looks like your father hunched over a barrel, but it's just a cloak. A voice that sounds like your friend Baptiste, but it's the wind. You chase it anyway. You always chase it. Here's your bitter historical truth. Survivor's guilt wasn't recorded in the medieval world the way we understand it now. They didn't have terms like trauma or post-plague grief response. But the symptoms were all there in the accounts. People wandering aimlessly, losing speech, falling into deep melancholy, or withdrawing from society completely. It was so common that chroniclers called it the second death, a soul broken by what the body survived. And the strange footnote? Some survivors believed they had inherited the sins of the dead, especially if they outlived someone holier or kinder. A baker in Spain reportedly threw himself into a pyre because he survived when the town priest didn't. He left behind a note that read, "I should not be the last." People understood. No one even tried to stop him. Modern scholars still puzzle over how entire communities reformed themselves psychologically. There were no counsellors, no trauma care, no place to put the emotional wreckage, so they buried it. They rebuilt over it. They painted new murals, sang new hymns, and pretended the world had always been this way. You're not ready to pretend yet. One morning, you find yourself walking through the woods without remembering how you got there. You've left town behind, the trees closing in on you with their silence. You sit under a tree and watch ants carry a dead beetle across a route. It takes them a long time. The beetle keeps slipping. Still, they don't stop. You admire that. You don't know what it means, but it feels important. You wander back to town after sunset. No one noticed you were gone. No one even asks. That night you write names in the dirt. Every name you can remember. You fill the entire floor. Some you can't spell, so you just draw their face. Crude circles, lines for hair, dots for eyes. You sleep among them, careful not to smear the lines. In your dreams, the names whisper to each other. Not in sadness, just in recognition. You keep going, because you have to, because your breath still fogs in the morning and your feet still work. You wake up, stretch, eat something, avoid coughing. You stay alive. And some days, that's the most rebellious thing you can do. One evening, you meet another orphan. Her name is Margot. She's taller than you, with ink-stained fingers and one eye that twitches when she's nervous. She says she used to help her father write church records. You ask if she remembers how. She shrugs and says, "Sort of." You give her a bit of charcoal and some spare parchment from a broken ledger. She starts writing names too. You don't talk much, you just sit and write. It feels like resistance, like you're keeping something from being forgotten. At some point someone finds the two of you and asks, "Why bother?" And you say, "Because they were here. Because you were here." Because sometimes surviving means being the memory of the ones who didn't. You stink. Not just the usual "you haven't bathed in a few days" kind of stink. This is next level. This is layers of fear, sweat, smoke, and something uncomfortably close to rot kind of stink. You smell like someone who's spent too much time around the dead and not enough near clean water. And honestly, you're used to it. Everyone is. You only notice it when someone new shows up. Someone who still carries a trace of lavender soap or beeswax on their clothes. It's jarring, like a ghost of cleanliness. Bathing isn't something you do anymore unless it rains and you happen to be standing under the right eaves. Soap is a memory. The rivers stink of algae and old decay, and even when you find a clean puddle, you hesitate. You don't trust the water. You don't trust much of anything anymore. But the smells, oh the smells, they never stop. Your world has become a symphony of them. Mildew in blankets, sour bread dough rising in unwashed crocks, the acrid bite of smoke from burned out houses, and underneath it all, the steady, choking musk of bodies. Fresh death has a sharp metallic scent, like iron left too long in the rain. But the older dead? They smell sweet, sickly sweet, like bad fruit and meat gone soft. You cover your face with cloth whenever you pass a corpse or an alley that feels wrong, but it barely helps. Some people carry sprigs of rosemary or sachets of dried lavender tied to their wrists. Others burn orange peels or sprinkle vinegar in doorways like wards. You've done all of it. The rosemary helps a little, until you realise the herb is now associated more with funerals than food. You can't even enjoy a nice smell anymore without thinking of death. One historical fact. During the plague, people believed that smells were the disease itself. The idea of miasma, the illness travelled through bad air, was widespread. So folks loaded up on perfumes, incense, and aromatic woods. They wore pomanders, little metal orbs filled with herbs and spices, hanging from belts or the necklaces, like protective charms. People even doused their clothes in vinegar, rosewater, or urine. Yes, urine. You don't want to know why, they thought it cleansed. A fringe fact you'll appreciate. Some people sewed flowers into their masks or hats, creating personal scent clouds as a barrier against sickness. One monk in Belgium supposedly kept a dead squirrel soaked in lavender around his neck. That was his plague shield. He died anyway, not surprising. Scholars still argue over how much this obsession with scent helped or hurt. Sure, burning herbs and closing doors probably kept out fleas, but not enough to stop the plague. Others say it was more psychological than medical. Having something fragrant to focus on gave people a sense of control, a whiff of hope in a world that stank of death. You remember how your mother used to boil cinnamon sticks in wine on cold days? The smell would drift through the house, sweet and warm. It was comforting. You haven't smelled cinnamon in months. You'd kill for cinnamon now, not to eat it, just to remember her better. Margot, your new writing companion, has started collecting weird-smelling things. She lines them up along the chapel wall like trophies. Garlic bulbs, dried mint, 2 oranges that are halfway to collapse. She's trying to make a perfume. It's a project. She mashes things with a stick and rubs the paste behind her ears like it makes her invincible. You don't have the heart to tell her she still smells like sweat and parchment, but at least she smells like something. One day she finds a vial of something golden in a collapsed apothecary's house. She pops the cork, sniffs, and reels back. Honey, she says, real honey. You both pass it back and forth, inhaling like it's a relic. You don't even eat it. It feels too sacred. Just being near it feels like a gift. But your own smell, it betrays you. It follows you like a shadow. You notice people flinching when they pass you. You flinch at yourself sometimes. You think about burning your clothes, but what would you wear after? The corpse gatherer's robe, the mouse-bitten shawl you found in the well? So you keep wearing what you've got. You air them out in the sun when possible. You rub lavender under your arms and pretend it helps. And you accept grudgingly that you probably smell like someone halfway to a funeral. At one point a man offers you soap, real soap, wrapped in cloth and pressed with some kind of herbal scent. Made it myself, he says. Only a few left. He wants to trade it for a pouch of barley and a handful of copper buttons. It's everything you have. You hesitate, then you hand it over. Later that night you use it, slowly, carefully, like it might break. You boil water, strip down and scrub until your skin feels raw. You close your eyes and try to remember the last time you felt this clean. The scent clings to you for days. When it fades, you bury the wrapper under your mattress, like a relic. You find yourself sniffing it when you're too sad to sleep. Clean doesn't mean safe. Clean doesn't mean cured. But in a world where rot creeps in from every direction, sometimes smelling like something alive is enough to trick your mind into thinking you still are. The world is writing itself in ashes, and you're one of the few left who can still hold a quill. It starts with a simple idea. One that slips into your mind late at night when you can't sleep, and the wind sounds like someone whispering through cracked shutters. Someone should write this down. You mention it to Margot one morning while you're mending a hole in your tunic with chicken bone needles. She nods like she's already been thinking the same thing. She pulls out one of the ledgers you salvaged from the burnt-out town hall and sets it gently on the table like it's something sacred. And in a way it is. Paper is rare now, ink even rarer. But you still have some, made from crushed berries and charcoal mixed with what was once wine. It smells awful and bleeds a little on the page, but it works. You begin with names, then dates, then details, where they died, how they looked, what they said before the end. It feels like creating a map, only instead of roads and rivers, it's grief and memory. Sometimes you get poetic, other times brutally plain. Anna, 32, midwife, died with rosary in hand, and next line, Gerard, 7, didn't make it through the night. It's slow going. You write until your hands cramp, until the ink runs thin, until the grief gets too loud and you have to go outside and scream into the wind. But you always come back, because something in you whispers that if no one writes it, it didn't happen. That remembering is resistance. It's not just you and Margot. Other survivors come around, curious. One of the monks from the ruined abbey, half blind and muttering to himself, starts copying psalms on scraps of bark. A stonemason's daughter paints red and black swirls on the chapel walls with crushed berries. It's just to keep my fingers moving, she says, but there's meaning in it. Shapes within shapes. Faces, if you squint. One day someone brings a bundle of drawings, tiny wrinkled sketches of the plague carts, the mass graves, even a caricature of a plague doctor with a beak as long as his body. The eyes are too big. It's clearly satire, but it makes you laugh for the first time in days. Is it wrong to find it funny? Someone asks. Not if it's true, Margot replies. Here's your historical nugget. Despite the devastation, many people during and after the Black Death documented what they saw. Monks, merchants, nobles, even children. Some of the most vivid plague records come from teenagers. They describe the horrors without flinching. Some wrote poems, others drew diagrams, and a few wrote entire books detailing how society unravelled. And your odd little fact, there was one man, Giovanni Boccaccio, who survived the plague in Florence and later wrote the Decameron, a book about people telling stories in a country house while hiding from the plague. It was dark, funny, filthy and wildly popular. People wanted to laugh after everything burned. Turns out horror and humour are close cousins. What historians still debate is why some art and writing got darker while other works turned spiritual or surreal. Was it a split in how people processed trauma? Did it depend on class, gender, geography? Or was it just that art, like people, fractured under pressure and rebuilt itself into whatever shape it needed to survive? You don't think about legacy. You're not writing for scholars. You're writing because it hurts not to. The words leak out of you like blood from a bubo. Some entries you write in near trance. A list of everyone in your street, including the dog, with little notes beside each name. Marie, best jam. Old Thomas, smelled like smoke and onions. Baptiste, stupidly brave. Some nights you just write your own name over and over, as if repetition might make it mean something again. You try writing down dreams too. Lately they've been vivid. One where the moon hangs low like a swollen eye, or another where you're back in your old home, and all your family is alive but refuses to look at you. You write it all. Maybe someone will find it someday, maybe no one will, but it feels important. Margot starts compiling a second book, Strange Things People Tried to Cure the Plague. You help her with the entries, bathtubs filled with wine, sleeping on top of church roofs, eating spiders baked in bread, singing backwards, drinking mercury, whispering prayers into bread and then eating it. She wants to draw little pictures beside each one. For future laughs, she says, but her face doesn't smile when she says it. People begin to bring offerings to your little archive. A letter from a dead husband, unsigned. A child's shoe with initials carved inside. A spoon from a nun who prayed over the dying. You keep everything. You stack the pages, bind them with thread, and tuck them into hollowed-out bricks in the chapel wall. One afternoon you catch someone crying while reading an entry about a man who sang to his goats every morning until he died. You offer him a piece of barley bread. He takes it, still crying. It's like he's still here, he says between bites. That's the moment it hits you. Maybe surviving isn't about staying alive. It's about remembering who was here and making sure they're not erased. The past can't come back, but it doesn't have to vanish either. Not if someone writes it down. They come down the road like thunder with legs. Dozens of them, maybe more, all in white linen robes stained with red. At first, from a distance, you think it's another funeral procession. Then you hear it, the chanting. No words you recognise, just syllables mashed together into a rhythm that pounds in your ears and makes your skin crawl. And then you see the whips. Real ones. Long leather cords, some knotted with bone or metal. They walk barefoot, heads bowed, arms swinging in time, and every few steps, as if pulled by invisible strings, they stop. They raise the whips, and they beat themselves. Back split open, flesh tears, blood drips like punctuation. No screams, just that same eerie chant. Louder now, closer. The ground shakes with it. Thump, crack, chant, thump, crack, chant. You don't know who they are at first. Then someone beside you whispers, flagellants. The word makes your stomach tighten. You've heard stories. Bands of holy zealots travelling from town to town claiming they can drive out the plague by punishing themselves. They believe suffering will save the world, or at least their souls. They file into the town square like a moving wound. No smiles, no greetings, just pain worn like armour. People gather to watch. Some kneel, others just stare. A few begin to cry. You see one of the older women whispering a prayer with her hands clutched so tightly her knuckles are white. A little boy mimics the whipping motion, thinking it's a game. No one stops him. The leader steps forward. He's tall, skeletal, with hollow eyes and a voice like gravel, soaked in oil. "This world is stained by your sins," he bellows. "We suffer to purify what God has forsaken." And then he raises his whip and thrashes himself again, harder this time. The sound echoes like a cracked bell. You flinch. Historical fact. The flagellant movement exploded during the Black Death. They travelled across Europe, self-inflicting pain in public ceremonies, believing their bloodshed could cleanse the earth of God's wrath. They were banned by the church eventually, but not before they caused panic, and sometimes riots, wherever they went. Quirky fact, the flagellants had a strict schedule. They whipped themselves in measured beats, following a ritualised format. Some even carried sin scrolls, lists of society's offences they read aloud before each session. These included the usual suspects, greed, pride, lust, but also things like poor singing, women wearing red, and bad harvest etiquette. A mix of the deadly serious and the bafflingly petty. Scholarly debate still lingers. Were the flagellants a form of grassroots spirituality? Or did they spiral into a proto-cult? Medieval moral panic gone viral? Some argue they gave communities a sense of control, while others claim they fanned hysteria and spread the plague faster by ignoring quarantine. You watch one man whip himself until his robe clings to his back. Another collapses. No one helps him. They just step over his shaking body and keep going. You're not sure if that's loyalty or cruelty. Maybe both. Later that day they demand a town cleansing, Medior. You're not sure what that means until you see them forcing people into the square, demanding they confess sins. One woman is accused of vanity because she still braids her hair. Another is forced to kneel while a boy screams that she once sold underweight loaves of bread. They whip her too, not the flagellants, her neighbours. It's like the whole town was waiting for permission. You and Margot watch from a rooftop. She doesn't speak, just carves lines into a piece of wood. You glance down. It's a drawing of the man with the sin scroll, only in her version. He's got donkey ears and 2 left feet. You don't laugh, but you smirk, just a little. Later that night, you find one of the flagellants alone, praying in the chapel. He's bleeding from the mouth. You approach slowly. He doesn't look up, just whispers, "Do you think God is listening?" You don't know how to answer. He continues, more to himself than you. "I thought if I bled enough, the voices would stop." His hands shake. They didn't. You leave him there. The group stays for 2 more days. They camp in the square, light fires, chant into the night. Some villagers join them. Others hide. You find yourself staying out longer just to avoid walking past them. Their presence lingers, like a bad smell. When they leave, they don't say goodbye. They just march down the road, robes flapping, backs raw and gleaming in the sun. Behind them, they leave behind bloodstains, broken people, and a creeping sense of unease. A child asks, "Will they come back?" You hope not. You really, really hope not. Because there's a kind of plague that spreads without boils or coughs, the kind that infects people's minds, the kind that whispers, "Hurt yourself enough, and maybe you'll be forgiven." And you can't help but wonder what kind of God prefers that kind of devotion. The rumours start as a murmur, barely louder than the wind, trickling in through traders, travellers, whispers in back alleys. At first you don't understand. People talk in circles, avoiding the name like it's poison. They say things like, "Something's happening in the quarter by the old well," or "They're rounding people up again." You assume it's another band of flagellants, or maybe a new kind of sickness. Then you hear the word Jews. It hits your ears strangely. You've known Jewish families. They lived down the street, sold cheese, baked the best honey bread. One used to patch your clothes for a few buttons and a smile. You remember sitting outside their shop when you were younger, sharing scraps and bad jokes. You hadn't thought about them in weeks, not because you didn't care, but because their door had been shuttered so long you assumed they'd fled. Now people are saying they didn't flee. They were taken. You ask someone what that means, and he leans in too close and whispers, "They poisoned the wells." His breath is hot and sour. His eyes are wild. "They brought the plague." You step back. "That's not true," you say, more out of instinct than certainty. The man laughs, dry and cruel. You defend them? Another voice joins in. You drink their wine too? Suddenly, you're surrounded by suspicion, eyes narrowing like knives. You walk away, fast. That night, the synagogue is set on fire. You see the flames from your rooftop. They shoot up into the sky like an accusation, hot and roaring. The smell of burnt parchment and scorched wood drifts into your lungs. You sit there, frozen, while people cheer below. You see men with torches and axes, women watching with blank faces. One boy throws a rock through what's left of a stained glass window, then another. The next morning the streets are scattered with broken scrolls and charred prayer books. You pick up a piece and recognise a bit of Hebrew, letters you can't read but that feel sacred anyway. You tuck it into your sleeve without knowing why. Here's your horrible historical truth. During the plague years, thousands of Jewish communities across Europe were attacked, exiled or massacred. They were blamed for causing the disease, accused of poisoning wells, conspiring with demons, or simply being too different. Some cities tried to protect them, most didn't. Entire neighbourhoods were wiped out. And the strange, dark footnote? In some towns, the Jewish dead were blamed posthumously. Their graves were desecrated. In others, rabbis were tortured until they confessed to impossible crimes. Some local leaders genuinely believed it, others didn't, but blamed them anyway to calm the terrified mob. The scholarly debate continues. How much of this violence was spontaneous, and how much was orchestrated by leaders trying to redirect public anger? Was it raw fear? Greed for Jewish property? Centuries of quiet prejudice finally boiling over? Probably all of it tangled together into something vile and opportunistic. You don't see your old neighbours again. Not the cheesemonger, not the seamstress, not even the boy with the stutter who used to sneak you dried fruit. Their house is empty. You walk by and see the door swinging open, furniture overturned. Someone's already taken the copper pot from the hearth. That's the thing about fear. It doesn't stop once it gets what it wants. It needs more. A new target, a new reason, a new enemy. Later you overhear a group muttering about a widow who still talks to birds, about a boy who never gets sick, about you and your habit of writing things down. What are they writing anyway? Someone asks. Secrets? Spells? You move before they see you listening. You go back to the chapel and find Margot curled up in the corner, with ink on her fingers and a strange look in her eyes. She's shaking. You don't ask. You just sit beside her. Eventually she says, "They burned a girl in the next village." Her voice is flat. "Said she kissed a sick man and didn't die." She snorts. "Guess that's a crime now." You both sit in silence for a long time. Later you find a broken Torah scroll among the rubble. You don't know what to do with it. You don't want to burn it. You don't want to leave it. You wrap it in linen and hide it beneath the chapel floorboards with the rest of your ledger. Not because you think it'll protect you, just because someone has to honour what's left. Days pass. People stop talking about the fire, just like they stopped talking about the others. The flagellants, the well poison, the child who disappeared. Fear gets tired too. It burns hot, then cold, then quiet, until the next spark. But you don't forget. You write their names down. You sketch the synagogue from memory. You draw the cheese wheel you used to share with that boy who stuttered. You can't remember his name, so you write, "The boy with honey hands." That'll have to be enough. You don't tell anyone. But some nights, when you're alone, you light a candle. You whisper something that isn't quite a prayer. You say it anyway. You say it for them. Because in a world that forgets fast, the act of remembering feels like the only kindness you can still afford. It's strange how the world can burn to the ground and still find new ways to surprise you. You're walking through the lower end of town, what's left of it anyway, when you spot something that almost makes you laugh. A line. Not a line for bread or firewood or a priest's hurried blessing. No, this is a line of people holding tools. Pitchforks, shovels, even a half-rusted frying pan. You watch for a few minutes before someone tells you they're waiting to work. You blink. Work? Like it's 1346 again, and there's still a guild to report to. But yes, work. Someone's rebuilding a collapsed wall, someone else is starting up a new bakery with leftover grain and desperation. Another man, barefoot, face sunburnt, is offering coin for strong backs to dig irrigation channels. He says the crops are thirsty, the people are hungrier. And here's the thing, wages are going up. Not because people suddenly feel generous. No, it's simple numbers. Yes, so many are dead that the survivors, especially those who can still move bricks or swing hammers, are now in short supply. You hear someone joke that they used to beg for half a loaf, and now they're turning down full wages if they don't like the shift. It's not like you're suddenly rich. But for the first time in your life, you feel like your time has value. Like you matter more alive than you did when there were 10 people behind you willing to take your job. The town miller who used to sneer when you asked for extra flour now smiles like you're royalty. "Good to see you again," he says, as if he ever cared. You don't trust him, but you take the flour. And yet not everyone's happy about this new balance. The surviving nobles are unsettled. You hear whispers that they're angry, that they're writing letters to the king demanding price controls and fixed wages. The lower sort are getting ideas, they mutter, noses up, hearts clenched. They think death makes them equal. You hear one landowner say that out loud, with real venom. He's draped in silk, mismatched and dusty, but still finer than anything you've ever touched. They're peasants, he spits, not princes. When someone points out that half his staff is dead and the other half just walked off his land, he gets red in the face and starts yelling about divine order. You slip away before he notices you listening. The historical reality here is this. The Black Death broke the economy wide open. Labourers were suddenly rare, and rare things are valuable. Serfs walked off the land, craftsmen demanded higher wages, landowners panicked. Laws like the Ordinance of Labourers were passed to try to freeze wages and force workers to accept pre-plague conditions. But good luck with that when the world is literally collapsing. And here's a weird, true twist. Some people actually got rich. Not nobles, just survivors. Regular folks who inherited empty homes, land or shops. You could be nobody one day and a property owner the next just because your 10 cousins all died. It wasn't luck, it was a lottery of misery. Historians still argue about how long this new power balance lasted. Some say it sparked centuries of rebellion, the slow death of feudalism. Others argue that the powerful eventually clawed it all back with laws and force. But during that narrow window of time, the world tilted, and people like you stood a little straighter. You start helping the stoneworkers repair a bridge. It's hard, blistering work, but the pay is real. Coin, a loaf of bread, and meat once a week. Meat. You'd forgotten how heavy it tastes. Margot joins up with a group organising grain distribution. If we don't ration it, the new bakery will be out in a week, she says. She's not the same girl you found scribbling by candlelight. She stands taller now, gives orders, people listen. Some of the kids you thought wouldn't make it are thriving, weirdly enough. Like the chaos gave them room to grow. One boy you used to see chasing rats is now managing the poultry coops. A girl who never spoke is reading prayers to the sick, with a voice so clear it makes your bones feel washed. But not all the shifts are clean. There's tension, fights over property, disputes about whose land is whose now that no one's left to inherit it. One man claimed his neighbour's shop because the owner died childless. Turned out the owner had a cousin hiding in the woods. That didn't end well. Greed is still alive. More alive than ever. In the ashes, it's blooming. You walk past the church and see a notice posted on the door. Any labourer who refuses work at the old rate shall be punished. Someone's drawn a moustache on the bishop's face beside it. You can't help but smile, just a little. Because yes, the world's broken, but it's also shifting, cracking in ways that feel like possibility, and that's dangerous. Not everyone wants change. Some want the old order back, but others, you included, have seen too much to pretend you didn't. You've buried too many bodies to keep pretending birth defines worth. You've dug holes beside priests and paupers. Death made no distinction. So why should life? You find yourself standing in the square one evening, watching a heated debate between a merchant, a labourer, and what's left of the town council. You don't join in, you just listen, but you're smiling. Because once upon a time no one would have let people like you anywhere near decisions. Now, the ones who talk loudest are the ones who kept showing up. Not the richest, not the cleanest, just the ones who stayed. And you think maybe, just maybe, this world belongs to the survivors now. You hear it first as a rumour, muttered over stale wine by a man missing half his teeth. They're marrying the sick now. You raise an eyebrow. The man nods solemnly, wiping his mouth with the sleeve. Plague weddings, he says. God have mercy. And then he laughs. Too loudly, too long. Like the words taste insane and beautiful all at once. At first, you assume it's some twisted joke. Another sign the world's lost its mind. But then you see it. A girl in a red ribbon dress, ripped at the hem, one shoe missing, being walked down the middle of the street by two priests. The veil on her head is made of something that might once have been lace. Her face is pale, her lips are chapped, her eyes are vacant, staring into a distance no one else can see. The groom is standing under a makeshift canopy, swaying slightly. He's young, maybe, hard to tell. His arms are bandaged, his eyes are sunken. Someone props him up like a doll that forgot how to stand. A priest begins the ceremony. The words float through the square like ash. To have and to hold, in sickness and in health. Everyone freezes on that line. They hold hands, briefly. Then the boy collapses. The girl doesn't flinch. It's real. It turns out this wasn't the only one. People are doing it everywhere. Sometimes it's two sick people, both already doomed, clinging to something before the end. Sometimes it's a healthy girl being married off to a plague-struck boy to preserve the family line, or fulfill some long-standing betrothal agreement before the inheritance vanishes with the body. You hear about one couple who got married at the edge of a mass grave, reciting vows between coughs while their families wept and priests held incense to their faces to mask the smell. Historical fact. Plague weddings were real, not widespread but well documented, particularly among certain Jewish and Christian communities in parts of Europe. The idea was part desperation, part superstition, part spiritual insurance. Some believed that marrying during a time of crisis could invite divine mercy, or at least give the dying a taste of joy before the end. The odd fringe detail. In some cases, these weddings were arranged between strangers, pulled from different towns, chosen because they were both terminal, like a final matchmaking service run by people in religious panic. One rabbi in Eastern Europe reportedly conducted dozens of plague weddings in a single month. Most of the couples were buried side by side the next day, and what scholars can't quite agree on is why communities latched onto this practice so fervently. Was it love, hope, madness, or just ritual for ritual's sake? One last chance to impose order on chaos. One last try at saying life still matters. Margot doesn't laugh when you tell her, she just frowns. What if they didn't want to get married? She asks. You shrug. What if they didn't want to die? She nods. Right. You see another wedding a week later. This one's quieter. No priests, no ceremony, just two teens standing under an oak tree, hands clasped. He's wearing a butcher's apron. She has a bouquet of weeds and broken feathers. They recite their own vows. Nothing fancy, just promises to remember each other, to not be alone, to die together, if it comes to that. You watch from a distance, feeling something twist in your chest. It's not envy. Not exactly. It's the hollow ache of witnessing something beautiful blooming out of ruin and knowing you're too afraid to touch it. You remember being kissed once, before the plague. You were young. It was awkward. Teeth bumped. You both laughed. That laugh echoes in your memory now like a song from a village that no longer exists. You haven't touched anyone in weeks, haven't been touched in longer. You think about that more than you'd like. You see others steal moments, hand-holding shared blankets, leaning on each other during walks to the well. You wonder if you're still capable of softness, or if surviving has scraped all of it out of you. Then one night Margot surprises you. She puts her hand on yours while you're writing, a simple gesture, no words. Just contact, warm, real, human. You don't pull away. You don't even look at her, you just sit there, breathing, and for a few heartbeats the silence is less cruel. You hear talk of arranged marriages between surviving families, all part of rebuilding plans. People say, we have to make more people, like it's math, like it's planting potatoes. Some talk of alliances, others talk of necessity. He has grain, someone says, she has strong hips. You want to scream, instead you go home and punch a wall until your knuckles split. Not all the weddings are sad. One couple throws a celebration in the old bakery. Candles, music, even dancing. They make a cake from flour and river berries. It's terrible, but everyone eats it. Some laugh, a few even cry, not because they're sad, but because they'd forgotten joy was still possible. You don't attend, you listen from outside, the sound of feet scraping stone in rhythm, someone playing a pipe, laughter rising through smoke. It makes your chest ache, not with grief, with the longing. Because even in the middle of all this loss, even standing knee-deep in sorrow, people are still trying to love. Clumsily, bravely, against all odds. You write about it later. Not the deaths this time, not the boils, just the way the girl smiled when she held her plague-struck husband's hand. The way the teens under the oak tree made promises no one would witness but the leaves. The way laughter leaked from the broken windows of the bakery like sunlight in winter. Maybe that's what weddings are now. Not about future or family or legal ties. Maybe they're just a final act of rebellion. One last shout into the void. I choose this. I choose you. I choose life, even if it's only for one more day. You're 17, maybe 18. Who knows anymore? And your body feels like it belongs to a different person, not because you've grown taller or stronger or wiser, but because this body has outlasted things it shouldn't have. It's seen too much, carried too many memories. You look at your hands sometimes and wonder when they became tools instead of parts of you. They lift, dig, fight, steal, comfort, and write. They do everything but rest. And now that the world is possibly rebuilding itself, people are looking at you like you're supposed to become something. A blacksmith, a clerk, a wife, a soldier, a quiet cog in whatever's left of this crooked machine. But here's the thing, there are no rules anymore. The adults are mostly gone. The priests are broken, the mayors are missing. The old men who used to shake their heads at your generation now shake their fists at the sky, begging for answers no one's giving. It's the young who are filling the vacuum. And not always gracefully. You start to notice things. Kids your age taking over abandoned homes, squatting like kings. One sets up a tavern in what used to be the cobbler's shop. They serve watery ale and stolen soup, and no one asks questions. Someone else organises a band of runners who go between nearby villages carrying notes, trade offers, and sometimes secret gossip. They wear cloaks and paint streaks under their eyes like warriors. No one told them to do it. They just did. There's a group who meets in the woods once a week. You've been once. They light torches and drink mushroom wine and dance barefoot in the dark. Some say prayers, others make jokes. One girl reads old fairy tales aloud, twisting the ending so they're about plague monsters and lovers who outwit death. It's beautiful and stupid and haunting. You go back the next week. The world is a mess, but it's also loose now. And in that looseness, something wild is blooming. One night, a boy races past you with a goat on a rope and yells, "Wedding present!" before vanishing around a corner. Another day, you find chalk drawings all over the well, suns with angry faces, a woman in a crown made of rats, a dog with wings. There's no signature, just joy. The boundaries between things have crumbled, property lines, age hierarchies, even gender. A girl named Alain now wears her brother's clothes and insists everyone use he. No one argues. Why would they? The world exploded. Alain survived. That's more than enough authority. You cut your hair short one day. Just felt like it. Margot helps you, clumsy but focused. When it's done, you look in the mirror and grin. You don't look like your old self. You don't look like anyone's idea of what you should be. You look free. Here's the historical fact. Post-plague society saw a temporary breakdown of traditional roles, especially among young people. With so many adults dead or incapacitated, teenagers and 20-somethings often had to take charge of homes, land and trade. Many entered roles they never would have touched before. Women ran businesses, boys became midwives. In some areas, local councils were made entirely of people under 25. And your odd footnote, a few towns saw youth-led festivals emerge where people dressed in costumes, mocked authority, and paraded through the streets with no supervision. In one account, a group of teens crowned a pig king for a day and made it official by carving its name into the town gate. The pig escaped. The symbolism didn't. Historians still debate whether these behaviours were rebellion, therapy, or just what happens when young people get power before they are told how to use it. Some call it plague anarchy, others call it accidental progress. You call it life, weird, raw, unpolished life, and you cling to it. Not all of it's fun. Some teens form gangs and shake down travellers for food. One group took over the grain store and started charging whatever they felt like. You helped sneak a sack of flour out for a family with a coughing baby. You still have the bruises. You do it again. You've started sneaking out more. Not to escape, just to move, to feel the air. You walk until the town shrinks behind you and the stars are loud again. One night you find a hollow tree filled with feathers. No idea why. You leave a copper coin there. Another time you find a shack covered in bones strung on cords. You don't go inside, you leave a note. Still here, still trying. Margot starts a collection of plague jokes. Some are awful, most are worse. You contribute a few. Why didn't the corpse go to confession? He couldn't kneel. What do you call a town with no mayor and 1,000 rats? Ours. What's the plague's favourite colour? Black, like your sense of humour. You laugh too hard at that one. Margot rolls her eyes but smiles. You sometimes wonder what people in the future will say about you. Will they call you lost, broken, heroes, survivors, rebuilders, or just the ones who happen to live? You don't know, you don't care. You're not trying to be remembered. You're just trying to exist long enough to figure out what you are. And maybe, just maybe, write a world that feels less like a grave and more like a dare. You're standing in the old cathedral when it hits you. This place is full of ghosts, and none of them are quiet anymore. The building's half collapsed. The ceiling gapes like a mouth that forgot how to close, and pigeons now roost where saints once glowered down. But the light is beautiful here, slanting through the broken stained glass in soft reds and blues that fall across the altar like spilled wine. Someone's painted new images on the cracked walls. Not saints, not angels. Something else. A woman with hollow eyes holding a crown made of thorns. A child dancing on a pile of skulls. A rat with wings soaring through a starless sky. They're crude, yes, but powerful, emotional, even when you don't fully understand what they mean. You find out later it was Margot. Of course it was. She calls it post-plague sacred. You ask what that means. She shrugs and says, whatever feels true now. And you get it. Because the old truth doesn't fit anymore. The God who watched all this happen without lifting a finger. The saints who stayed silent. They don't feel real. But this, the cracked cathedral, the bleeding rat on the wall, the strange chant someone's started humming in the evenings. This feels real. And it's not just Margot. Art is erupting everywhere. You pass murals on alley walls, skulls sprouting flowers, skeletons embracing, the Virgin Mary weeping blood. Someone sculpts a statue from bones and river clay, half human, half an animal crouched like it's about to speak. You don't ask who made it. You just leave a candle nearby. People are painting, carving, singing, not to celebrate, but to process, to make sense of a world where everything beautiful cracked in half. The old hymns feel empty, so they write new ones. You hear one girl singing a lullaby to a dying man that starts sweet and ends in wailing. It's haunting. You hum it for days. Here's the historical truth. The Black Death ignited a wave of artistic transformation. Much of it grew darker, stranger, more obsessed with the death, time and decay. The danse macabre, the dance of death, emerged as a major theme. You'd see paintings of skeletons leading kings, peasants and priests alike into the grave. Because in death, everyone's equal. And here's the quirky footnote. Some towns had memento mori festivals, where actors dressed as corpses and paraded through the streets. Not to scare, but to remind. Remember, you too shall die. Strangely enough, people laughed. It became tradition, grim but comforting in a strange European sort of way. Scholars still debate whether this artistic shift was just grief, or the beginning of something bigger. Some say it laid the groundwork for the Renaissance, a total rebirth of human creativity. Others argue it was just mass trauma leaking onto the walls. Maybe it was both. You start drawing too. You're not good. But that doesn't matter. You scratch little images into clay tiles with broken nails. You etch faces you've lost, boil scenes from your dreams into jagged little compositions. Once you draw a tree with candles in the branches and mouths in the roots. Margot says it's terrifying, you keep it anyway. A boy named Ludo sets up a performance space in a barn. Every week people come to watch. There's music, puppets, recited poems. One night he stages a play about a rat who becomes a priest and tries to bless the plague away. You nearly choke laughing. The audience applauds like it's royalty visiting. Someone brings food, turnip stew and flatbread. A girl hands you a flower she made from cloth and ash. You pin it to your tunic. The petals fall off the next day, but the gesture sticks with you. This is what life looks like now. Not rebuilding what was, but creating what might be. And none of it's neat. None of it's perfect. It's art born from pain, and that makes it messy, raw, and strangely holy. You see someone painting over an old portrait of a bishop. They smear out the face and paint a swarm of rats in his robes. Beneath it they scrawl, "No one heard us praying." You stare at it for a long time. Then you add a single word. Same. And still, the old art lingers. In the ruined monasteries, on the parchment you salvage from fallen abbeys, you see the gold leaf flaking from the illuminated texts, the saints slowly fading under time and mildew. You respect them even if you don't trust them. You leave them where they lie. But in the chapel where Margot's plague murals spread across every wall, you light a candle every time you enter. Not because you worship it, but because you understand it. And understanding feels more sacred than faith now. One night, a stranger plays music in the square. A simple tune on a lute with one cracked string. He doesn't sing, he just plays. People stop, they sit, they listen. Some close their eyes. Some cry. It doesn't sound like mourning. It sounds like remembering. You lie on your back and look up at the stars. They haven't changed, but you have. You wonder what kind of paintings children born after the plague will draw, what stories they'll hear. If they'll see skeletons as frightening or familiar, if they'll laugh when they hear that once a group of teenagers danced barefoot in a burned-out barn and called it a miracle. You hope they do, because that's what it was. You pick up your charcoal and start drawing, not because you think it'll last, but because for one brief, impossible moment, you're alive enough to leave a mark. You used to pray out of habit. Quick mutters before meals, sleepy murmurs before bed, guilt-driven confession when you thought too much about girls or stole a plum. But now you don't even know who you're praying to. The words feel hollow, the air too quiet. And the church? The church is broken. Not just the buildings, but the whole idea of it. The first cracks appeared early, when the priests started dying faster than the rest of you. One by one they coughed, bled, and vanished, just like everyone else. But unlike the bakers, the butchers, and the cobblers, they weren't supposed to. They were blessed, weren't they? Chosen. You remember one priest, Father Mathieu, who stood in the pulpit and swore God would spare the faithful. He was dead within a week. His robe, soaked through with his own blood, collapsed at the foot of the altar. Some priests ran, just packed their things and left in the middle of the night, robes flapping, leaving behind locked doors and unanswered prayers. You don't blame them, not really. You would have run too if you thought it'd help. But still, when the people who claimed to speak for God abandoned their posts, something inside you shifted. And then there were the ones who stayed, and lost their minds. You remember another priest who started screaming about sins in the marketplace, tearing pages from the book and eating them. One man tried to bless the air by lighting everything on fire. The bell tower, the pews, the choir books, the flames lit up the night sky while he sang hymns out of key. Eventually the sermon stopped. The chapels turned into body storage. The holy water ran dry. You stepped into the cathedral one day and found a corpse lying in front of the crucifix, flies crawling across the wooden feet. You weren't sure if the person had been praying or just gave up and died there. Maybe both. Here's the fact historians like to skate around. The church failed spectacularly during the Black Death. Not everywhere, not every priest, but enough. The promise of divine protection turned sour. Clergy died in droves, and those who survived often did so by hiding. Some sold forgiveness for coin, others fled with what little money the parish had left. A fringe fact? In some towns, the last rites were replaced by layperson blessings, just people doing their best. Farmers, widows, children crossing themselves over dying neighbours. There were even pop-up holy men who claimed visions, invented prayers, and sold plague charms made of chicken bones and candle wax. Scholars still argue about the long-term damage. Some say it was the beginning of religious doubt, a crack that would eventually open into the Reformation. Others argue the opposite. But for some, the trauma made them cling tighter to God, searching for meaning in ashes. But no one denies it. The plague shook faith like a thunderclap. You still see people kneeling, old women with cracked hands and stringy hair, murmuring rosaries with eyes shut tight. One man spends every dawn drawing crosses in the dirt outside his home. You asked him why once. He said, "If I stop, I'll disappear." You nod like you understand, because maybe you do. Margot doesn't pray anymore. God went quiet, she says, so I did too. She wears a saint's medallion around her neck, not out of belief, but because it was her mother's. She says it smells like rosemary and wax. That's faith enough. You try sometimes, whisper little nothings into the wind. They aren't prayers exactly, more like wishes, bargains. Please let Margot wake up tomorrow. Please keep the boy in the bakery from coughing. Please let this scab be from a splinter and not something worse. And when no one answers, you tidpad. There's no items. You pretend someone does. The strangest part? With the church fading, something else is rising. People lighting candles not in chapels but in doorways, whispering new names of protection, painting symbols in ash above their beds, stars, spirals, birds. One woman claims she dreamed of a goddess with a rat crown who promised to guard the weak. Others are beginning to believe her. It's not religion, not really. It's something rawer, something stitched from grief, myth, and desperate hope. You call it what it is, survival magic. Doesn't matter if it works, it feels like it does. There's a boy who swears the well spirits are angry and has started throwing bits of bread into the water as offerings. A girl hums lullabies in Latin and says her mother hears them in heaven. You know a man who carries 3 stones in his pocket and rubs them whenever he feels feverish. These are my prayers now, he says. They've answered more than the priests ever did. You don't laugh, you carry a feather in your pocket, a gift from Margot. She said, it's from a bird that survived. You touch it when you feel that clawing emptiness in your chest. You don't know if it helps, but you haven't taken it out. Sometimes, late at night, you sit in the broken cathedral with the roof open to the stars. You stare at the crumbling statue of the Virgin and whisper, did you watch all this happen? And in the stillness you think maybe she did. But whether she wept or turned her back, you'll never know. You write your own psalm in your journal. It's not holy, not poetic, it just says, I was good, I was kind, I was small, I lived, and I kept living. Even when it hurt, maybe that's a prayer, maybe it's enough. You hear the word over before you believe it. Someone says it in passing, casually, like it's just another observation. The plague is over, just like that. Like saying the market's reopened or the geese are nesting early this year. You wait for the laugh, the punchline, the nervous correction. But it doesn't come. They just keep walking. It's not over. Can't be. You still see smoke from burn pits in the next village. You still hear the cough in the boy 2 houses down. There are still red crosses on doors. And that smell, the sour, bitter stink of rotten ash and old despair, still lingers in every alley. But then you notice the changes. Little things. The bread stall is open again. There are 2 loaves, 2. Someone swept the church steps even if no one's preaching inside. You see a girl wearing yellow, bright and loud and unnecessary. It stings your eyes in the best way. You realise people are starting to act like it's over. Well, not because it is, but because they need it to be. And for a while you let yourself believe it too. You wash your clothes in the river. You comb your hair. You help rebuild the schoolhouse. You even laugh when a dog steals your heel of bread and runs off like it's got secrets. You laugh and don't feel guilty. Then it comes back. A man collapses in the market, blood pouring from his nose. A mother tries to hide her daughter's fever behind locked doors, but word gets out. Another red X appears. The bells start again, rusty and trembling. The second wave is quieter. The shock's worn off. No one panics like they did before. There's no running, no screaming, just resignation, like a grim routine has resumed. You go back to burning herbs, whispering prayers, counting coughs. The fear is duller now, but it cuts deeper. Historical truth. The Black Death didn't hit once and vanish. It came in waves over years, even decades. Some regions suffered repeat outbreaks every 5 to 10 years, each one smaller but still devastating. Survivors of the first wave often didn't survive the second. A strange and chilling fact. Some communities would declare the plague gone prematurely, sometimes based on astrological predictions or the bloom of a specific flower, or even just wishful thinking. This false relief was sometimes followed by the most brutal resurgence. celebrations cut short by mass burials. And the scholarly mystery? There's still debate about why certain waves hit harder than others, or why some towns were spared entirely while others were repeatedly ravaged. Was it immunity, isolation, climate, sheer dumb luck? We still don't know. You feel the shift in people's eyes. Not terror now, not grief, just exhaustion. There's only so much a soul can take. You see a woman holding her dying husband's hand and not crying. Not because she doesn't care, but because the tears already dried up months ago. She's just waiting now. You sit by Margot's side one night and ask her, what if it never ends? She thinks for a while, then says, then we keep building the world around it. You ask how. She shrugs. One brick, one laugh, one lie that becomes true. The second wave takes fewer people, but it feels worse, because now you've let hope in, and watching it crawl back into the dirt stings in places the first wave didn't reach. A girl you've been teaching to read dies overnight. You find her journal tucked under her cot, 2 pages, scrawled in jagged script. One says, I want to see snow. The other says, thank you. You don't know what the thank you is for. You pretend it's for everything. You keep writing. You add a new section to your record, the aftermath that wasn't. It's a mess of names, feelings, weather notes, new symptoms, and bad jokes. You start drawing the dead as stars. You don't know why. Margot does the same, only hers are little plants. We're compost, she says. Maybe something good grows. You burn incense in the chapel, not for God. He's still not answering, but because the scent reminds you of your mother's kitchen. You make soup that tastes like regret. You fix the garden wall again, even though it keeps collapsing. You hug a stranger who breaks down in the street, then walk away before they can ask your name. Because this time you know better. This time surviving means bracing for what's next. You hear rumours of another village going dark. Completely gone, someone says. Nothing left but bones and butter. That last part makes no sense, but no one questions it. You stop asking if it's truly over. You stop needing it to be. Instead, you find yourself whispering the same line at the end of each day. You didn't get me yet. And that's enough. Even now, after everything, after all the graves and prayers and screaming into the void, you still dream of the plague. Not as it was, but as it feels. The dreams aren't filled with blood or bodies, no piles of corpses, no moaning from behind bolted doors, nothing so literal. Instead, it's silence. Long, heavy stretches of nothing. Streets that go on forever with no doors, no faces. Wind that whispers names you haven't spoken in weeks. The ground crumbles if you try to run. You always wake up sweating, not afraid exactly, just shaken. Like your body remembers something your mind's trying to file away under. Don't think about this before bed. The worst part? You get used to it. The dreams become familiar, like visiting an old burned house that still smells like home. Margot says she dreams of rats. Always rats. Sometimes they talk. Sometimes they sing. Once, she says, she dreamed she was one, scampering through the bones of a ruined town nesting in a priest's skull. She says it with a crooked grin, like it's funny. It isn't. Everyone dreams now. You hear it in the way people pause mid-sentence, eyes unfocused, the way they flinch at nothing, the way they react when someone touches their shoulder without warning. You've seen more than one person curl into themselves when a bell rings. You understand the sound of bells used to mean death. It still does. You talk less about the plague during the day, but it owns your nights. It leaks in through your ears and settles behind your eyes. Even good dreams have cracks. You'll be dancing, eating warm bread, holding someone's hand, and suddenly the walls rot away, and you're in the square again, watching someone burn. There's no escaping memory. Not really. Your body carries it in ways you don't understand. Here's your historical truth. There was no term for trauma or PTSD in the 14th century, but the signs were there, recorded in letters, chronicles, even art. Survivors wrote about numbness, hallucinations, weeping that wouldn't stop, or days when they couldn't get out of bed. Some chroniclers broke mid-sentence and never resumed. Others stopped writing entirely after the worst wave. And here's your strange little detail. Some survivors claimed to hear the plague singing. No joke. They'd report hearing faint music in their dreams or whispering voices near mass graves. One account from France described a woman made of wind who walked the fields calling names. She always knew yours. Modern scholars still wrestle with how to categorize it. Was it mass grief? Hallucination? Folklore? or just the mind trying to fold horror into a shape it could carry? You're not a scholar, you just know what it feels like. It feels like forgetting how to relax, like blinking and realising you've been gripping your jaw for 10 minutes straight, like apologising for things you didn't do, just in case, like suddenly bursting into laughter over something meaningless, because if you don't, you'll scream. You try everything to keep it at bay. Chopping wood, walking until your feet blister, sorting grain, rewriting the same name 10 different ways just to see which spelling feels right. You even try drinking more, but that just makes the dreams louder. Margot suggests a fire ritual. Write it down, she says. Burn it. Watch it go. You do. You write down the moment you left your brother's body at the chapel. You watch the flames curl the paper and eat it whole. It doesn't erase it, but it does feel like a line drawn in the dirt. A boundary. This pain lived here. Now it's ash. You begin to keep 2 journals, one for facts, the other for dreams. You don't let anyone read the second one. Not even Margot. Not because it's shameful, just because it's sacred in a different way. You notice people inventing habits, tiny rituals that make no sense but feel necessary. One boy taps the doorframe 3 times before entering. A woman hums the same note every time she stirs a pot. You snap your fingers when the chapel bell rings. You didn't mean to. It just started. You've done it ever since. At night, people gather and tell plague stories like they're folklore now. The man who coughed coins, the girl who never got sick because she slept under goat skins, the family that locked themselves in a wine cellar for 3 years. Everyone has one. Some are true, some aren't, does not matter. It's how you stitch yourselves back together. You meet a man who claims to have outrun the plague 5 times, moving from town to town. He says it never caught him because he left before the first bell rang. He hasn't slept in 2 days. He doesn't blink much. You sit with him for a while. You don't ask him to stop talking, because sometimes telling the story is the only way to believe it actually happened. One night, Margot wakes you up, whispering, "I heard her." You don't ask who, you just nod and sit beside her. She shakes for a while, then stops. You give her your feather. You realise in your own way that the plague never really leaves. It just moves in quieter, under your skin, behind your eyes, in the spaces between breaths. But you also realise you're not alone in this. And in a world where the dead outnumber the living, that might be the only kind of healing there is. You don't notice the shift at first. It sneaks in, subtle and quiet. Like the first warmth of spring, so soft you think maybe it's just your imagination. But then you catch it. A conversation that doesn't end in hopeless silence. A field of barley pushing up green shoots in what used to be scorched earth. A woman explaining how she boiled willow bark to help with fever. She's not guessing, she's not praying. She's testing, watching, remembering what worked. People are starting to ask different questions now. Not, is God angry, or which well was cursed? But, what did they eat before they got sick? How many days from first cough to last breath? What happens if you boil the water twice? The tone is different. Not frantic. Curious. It's not just survival anymore. It's inquiry. You meet a man from a distant town who carries a notebook bound in goatskin and filled with obsessive notes. Symptom charts, temperature guesses, experiments with herbs and oils. He uses words like observation and pattern, and mutters about balance in the body like the plague is a puzzle, not a punishment. He's not a doctor, not officially, but that doesn't stop him. He shows you a sketch of a flea under a magnifying glass. He calls it a theory in legs. You have no idea what he means, but he's excited, and it's contagious in a way that doesn't kill you. And here's the wild thing, people are listening. Not the priests, they still clutch their books, eyes narrowed. But the blacksmith's wife brings the notebook man wild garlic. A shepherd gives him notes on which animals died and which survived. A teen with ink-stained fingers offers to copy his charts. You can feel something changing in the air. Not a cure, not yet, but a question that's bigger than superstition. A question shaped like, what if we could understand this? Here's the historical truth. The Black Death helped spark the early stirrings of modern science. It didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't always intentional. But the failure of religious explanations and traditional medicine left a vacuum, and into that vacuum crept something new. Observation, experimentation, skepticism. Not faith-based healing, but evidence-based thinking. And your weird little footnote? The plague may have indirectly fueled the use of eyeglasses. With so many scribes and survivors trying to read, write and copy under poor conditions, better lenses became more necessary. Suddenly, seeing clearly was useful, not just a vanity. Historians still debate how much credit the plague really deserves for advancing medicine. Did it truly shift minds? Or did it just kill off enough of the old thinkers to let new ones in? Either way, something shifted. Not just in knowledge, but in attitude. People stopped waiting for salvation and started looking for answers. You start collecting things, not just bones and bread crusts now, but ideas, notes, sketches, fever charts, recipes, cautions. You mark pages with bits of cloth. You write down what foods made people vomit and what herbs soothed a cough. You don't know what any of it means, but it feels important. Margot begins a new book, What We Learned. She draws plants, symbols, symptoms. She's not trying to be right. She's trying to remember. So they won't have to start from nothing, she says. You nod, because starting from nothing is a nightmare you've lived through. One day, a traveller passes through town, healthy and confident, wearing layers of cloth soaked in something that smells like pine and vinegar. He explains how his village lines houses with ash and isolates fevers in outdoor huts. We haven't lost anyone in a month, he says. You write it down, all of it. Later you catch a boy trying to draw the shape of a fly. He doesn't know why. It was buzzing around a sick cow, he says. Maybe it's part of it. He's not a scholar, he's barely literate, but he's paying attention. And attention is a weapon now. You wonder if this is what progress feels like. Not light bulbs and steam engines and magic potions, but just asking better questions, one breath at a time. You try your own experiments. You bury bread in lime and wait. You sniff mouldy apples and watch for patterns. You start soaking linens in herbs before using them on the sick. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. But you're watching, not guessing, watching. There's a rumour about a healer down south who's mapping symptoms on the body. Says swellings in the armpits point to one kind of infection, chest pains another. Someone else is collecting plague songs, rhymed steps to follow in case the sickness returns. Step 1, burn the bed. Step 2, boil the door. It sounds absurd, until it isn't. Not everyone approves. An old priest calls it blasphemy. He burns 3 of your notes in the square. You don't stop him. But that night, you rewrite them from memory, and add a few more. You realise you're no longer hoping someone will save you. You're hoping you'll learn enough to save someone else. And that shift, that quiet, defiant desire to understand instead of suffer, is more powerful than any prayer you've ever muttered. You're not sure what it'll become. A library, a handbook, a forgotten pile of parchment buried under future dust, but you keep writing. Because even if the plague returns, and it will next time, maybe someone will know what to do. It happens on a warm evening when the clouds are low and golden and the sky smells like turned soil and wet stone. You're sitting on the chapel steps, knees drawn up, journal open in your lap when Margot says it without looking up from her sketchpad. We should leave. You blink halfway through a sentence. Leave? You echo like the word is foreign. She shrugs. This town's not everything. We could find what's left, or what's next. She says it lightly, like suggesting a walk or a new stew recipe. But her eyes are serious. Exhausted, yes, but sharp in a way that makes your chest tighten. You look around. The village is still here, limping, quiet, stitched together with rough hands and shaky plans. A bakery that smells like hope. A schoolhouse that hasn't collapsed in a week. A few gardens, a lot of ghosts. You've helped build it. Piece by piece, this place knows you. And yet, it's not where you belong, not anymore. You sleep on it. You weigh the silence against the call in your bones. By morning, the answer's already pulsing behind your ribs. So you pack lightly. Journal, dagger, fire starter, feather, some dried apples. You almost forget your sandals. Margot brings her sketches, her knife, a handful of charms, and a pouch of seeds she's been hoarding since spring. In case the soil's good, she says. You leave a note in the chapel carved into a beam with a nail. We lived. We learned. We went looking. You don't know who it's for. There's no map, no plan, just the road, the sun, and your shadows stretching longer as the village disappears behind you. The air tastes different already. Less like smoke, more like beginnings. And this is what you never imagined during the worst of it. That there would be a moment not just after the plague, but beyond it. A moment not shaped by what you lost, but by what you might still find. It's quiet for the first hour. Just your footsteps, Margot's quiet hum, the occasional rustle of something alive in the brush. You expect to feel fear, guilt even, but all you feel is motion, like the part of you that's been frozen for months is finally thawing inch by inch. You pass through a burned-out village. Black timbers, empty wells, doors swinging like open mouths. No bodies, just traces. You leave a charm tied to a branch, something to mark the dead, to tell the silence that someone saw it. You camp under an ash tree that night. The stars are brutally clear. Margot makes tea with herbs you can't name. You talk about nothing. Favourite smells, dumb dreams, what clouds look like if you squint sideways. Then she asks, "What if there's nothing out there?" You sip your tea. Then we make something. And you mean it. Here's your historical truth. Many survivors didn't stay where they were. Some fled what remained of their homes. Others went looking for family, opportunity, or just something else. Entire villages relocated. New towns formed from fragments of old ones. The map of Europe shifted, not because of kings, but because of ordinary people chasing something after catastrophe. And here's the weird detail. A number of plague pilgrims began wandering, not out of piety, but out of aimlessness. They weren't looking for shrines, they were just walking, sometimes alone, sometimes in strange little bands, as some wore masks and some sang to themselves, some never stopped. Their existence straddled the line between spiritual tragic and deeply strange. Historians still don't know what to make of them. Were they prophets, drifters, healers, survivors so untethered they couldn't stop moving? We'll never know. But you get it. More than you should. Because staying still means sitting in the shadow of everything that tried to kill you. And walking forward, even blindly, feels like claiming the right to keep becoming someone else. You pass a field full of poppies. Wild, blood-red, careless things. Margot picks 3, tucks one into your pocket when you're not looking. You find a house with no roof but a working oven. You make bread with the last of your flour. It's burned on one side and raw in the middle. You eat every bite. You laugh too hard, you stay the night. At one point you cross a creek and find a stone painted with a face, child's drawing, weather-worn. You sit with it for a while just in case it needs company. You begin to write in a new tone, less about what happened, more about what might. You draw the stars as they are, then again, how they should be. Margot draws maps of towns that don't exist, yet. Forests that curve like ribs, markets under waterfalls, villages shaped like spirals. One evening you see firelight in the distance, another camp, voices, laughter, a dog barking. You and Margot freeze, out of habit. But slowly curiosity edges out fear. You approach. People, survivors, travellers, like you, they share food, they tell stories. One man trades a jar of pickled onions for one of your sketches. Another woman offers salt for your fire starter. She's missing 3 fingers. She plays a harp like nothing's wrong. No one talks about the plague. Not directly, but it's there, in the pauses, in the way people pass each other bread with both hands, in the way no one sleeps too far from the fire. You stay the night. The next day you walk on, not because you don't like them, but because you're not finished yet. You don't know where you're going, but with each step the past gets a little quieter. Not forgotten, just farther away. And ahead, there's space. Enough space for stories that haven't been written. Yet. There's a point on the road, far from any village, far even from the places that used to be villages, where the world just opens up. No walls, no fences, no bells tolling in the distance. Just rolling hills softened by grass, stones split by roots, an air so clean it tastes new. You and Margot stand at the top of a ridge, breathless from the climb, and stare out at a valley that stretches wide and wild and untouched. No smoke, no scars, no signs of the sickness that dragged you through hell. And you say, without meaning to, this could be it. Margot doesn't answer right away. She just stands beside you, her hand resting against your back, quiet like always. Then finally she says, "Let's see if it has a well." You laugh, a real one. Because yes, even in the afterglow of discovery, survival still nags at you like a hungry dog. Water, food, shelter, always the checklist. Hope is lovely, but hydration comes first. You make camp by a crooked elm tree. There's a stream nearby, narrow, clear, and humming with frogs. Margot digs a fire pit while you chase off a curious fox. You find mint growing by the rocks and crush it between your fingers just to smell something bright. That night, the stars feel too close, as if the sky dropped a few inches just for you. In the morning you start exploring. You find a flat patch of earth, not too dry, not too rocky. You test the soil, Break it with a stick, let it run through your hands. It'll grow, Margot says. Not like she's guessing, like she's certain. You start to build, slowly. A windbreak first, then a roofless shelter. You find a collapsed barn down the hill and drag back usable beams, cracked but solid. It's ugly. It leans a little, but it's yours. You carve your names into one of the boards, not the names you were given, but the ones you claimed during the worst of it. The names you used when you didn't know if you'd survive. You carve them deep, you make them real. Here's your historical truth. Some survivors of the Black Death became pioneers. They didn't go back to the same cities or manors or parishes. They started fresh, reclaiming wilderness, founding tiny new communities. Some of these settlements became towns, others vanished without a trace. But for a while they existed, born from ruin, sustained by stubbornness. And the strange footnote? A few written records from the 14th and 15th centuries mention plague-clear valleys, places where the disease seemed never to reach. Whether it was isolation, luck, or natural barriers, some of these spots became legendary. Travellers sought them out, hoping to find a future untouched by the past. Most found only myths. A few found something better. And the debate that still echoes? Historians argue whether these new outposts were acts of desperation or rebirth. Was it escapism, or the earliest spark of the Enlightenment? Were they hiding from the world, or rebuilding it on their own terms? You can't answer that. You just know what it feels like to hammer a nail into a beam and not wonder who'll be buried under it. The days pass gently here. You grow leaner, stronger, and the sun gives you new freckles. Margot's hair bleaches at the ends. You learn to read the clouds, to trap rainwater, to braid grass into cords strong enough to hang pots. You learn to trust silence. Not the kind that follows death, but the kind that cradles life. Other travellers pass through. You offer tea, bread, fire. Some stay a night. Some stay a week. One woman, older than either of you, stays a season and helps you build a second shelter. She tells you riddles you never solve. When she leaves, she hugs you so tightly you smell her tears in your tunic for days. The stories begin to return. Not the old ones, not saints or kings, but stories of you, of Margot, of the place on the ridge where the wind tastes clean and the stream sings like it remembers. Stories passed around fires, shared like bread, sometimes changed in the telling. You don't mind. And still the dreams come. Not every night, but enough. Some full of ash and silence, others stranger. A child you don't know offers you a flower made of bone. A house made of mirrors shows you all the people you used to be. A rat in a crown nods at you from a throne of moss. You write them down. You file them beside your old plague notes, beside Margot's maps and healing recipes. It's all part of the same story now. One night, you lie awake, listening to the wind move through the trees. Margot's sleeping beside you, one hand curled around a pouch of seeds like it's gold. You stare up at the stars and think about everyone who didn't make it. The names you wrote, the faces you forgot too quickly, the little girl who never saw snow, the boy who whistled off key every morning. You whisper all their names, the ones you remember, the ones you made up. You let them ride your breath into the dark. You promise to carry them. Because what else is history, if not a torch passed hand to hand in the middle of a storm? You fall asleep with dirt on your palms, scars on your ankles, and something like hope blooming quietly behind your ribs. Because you didn't just survive the plague, you outlived it. So now, here you are. The storm's behind you, the world is changed, and you, after everything, are still breathing. You stretch your legs out beneath a sky so calm it almost feels like a trick. A gentle breeze hums across the ridge. Grass tickles your ankles. Somewhere nearby, Margot is singing a song that has no words, just a melody you think she made up on the spot. And for the first time in what feels like years, you don't flinch when a bird calls overhead. You've come far. Not just in miles, but in miles of memory. In the heavy distances between grief and hope, between what you lost and what you found again. You can't count the bodies anymore, or the days you spent just trying to stay upright, or the nights where even dreaming felt dangerous. But you can count this. The weight in your pack, lightened with each page filled, the laughter you didn't expect, the meals shared with strangers who felt like ghosts and became friends, the quiet mornings, the songs that rise from nowhere. You won't forget. That's not the goal. You'll remember the faces, the smoke, the long silences, and the slow, strange healing that came after. The plague took too much to ever disappear from your bones completely, but it didn't take everything. It didn't take your voice, it didn't take your story, as it didn't take your right to rebuild. So maybe one day someone finds the journals, or the sketches, or the painted boards on the chapel wall. Maybe they'll read the names. Maybe they'll see what you saw, feel what you felt, know what you knew in the worst of it, that sometimes surviving isn't the end of the story, it's just the beginning of a new one. You lie back in the grass, close your eyes, and let the sounds of the world, this new still fragile world, wrap around you like a lullaby. It's been a long road, but tonight finally you sleep easy,